sports included. Today, we can view nearly any game from anywhere. Statistics show Americans' preferences are changing from the traditional broadcast and cable TV model as streaming becomes an accessible and affordable choice for Americans. Earlier this month, the NFL decided to show off one of its playoff games exclusively on a streaming platform. This game was the most streamed event in U.S. history. At the same time, its limited reach made it the least watched NFL playoff game this year. While Americans have unprecedented access to high-quality content and a nearly unlimited number of options of content they can consume, the amount of sports content available is fixed. The consumer demand for sports content, combined with its limited supply and increased competition between networks, cable channels, and streaming platforms to carry sporting events, has driven the cost of the rights up. Today's hearing is just the beginning of the discussion. Given the various changes in the industry, this hearing provides an opportunity for Congress to better understand this industry and how it functions today. I look forward to our discussion and thank our witnesses for their willingness to be with us today as the representatives of their business. And at this time, I now recognize for 5 minutes the gentlelady from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're just 10 days out from the Super Bowl, and I couldn't think of a better time for this hearing. As a continuation of our previous media marketplace hearing, I know these issues are important to our constituents. Sports are a foundational part of American life, and these issues have broad implications for fans and the economy. While the media market has changed over the years, one thing that has remained consistent: Americans love their sports. Sports, more than any other form of entertainment, are still the principal driver of TV viewership. Last year, 97 of the top 100 most watched broadcasts were sports events. The Super Bowl is the most watched television broadcast in the United States every year, and last year's game was the most watched domestic telecast of all time. This popularity means one thing: sports are still profitable. 30-second ad slots for last year's Super Bowl each netted $7 million, and the NFL generated well over $4 billion in advertising revenue in the 2022 season. All of this success is occurring against the backdrop of a rapidly shifting media marketplace. Consumers have more choices than ever when it comes to the way they watch their favorite sports. Streaming helps increase competition, drive down costs, and allow consumers to cut the cord if they want to. Rather than signing up for large bundles full of content, many consumers aren't interested in. Online video provides consumers a better chance to pay for everything they want and nothing that they don't. These services are also providing new avenues for diverse content to reach a wider audience. From rapidly growing leagues like the WNBA or women's NCAA volleyball to more targeted content like Major League Soccer and Formula One, streamers are creating new markets. But while the proliferation of streaming has benefited consumers in many ways, it's also created new challenges. The massive fragmentation of the sports media market means consumers must now sign up for multiple streaming services to get the content that they want. And in extreme cases, the only way to watch big games is to sign up for the streamer who holds exclusive rights to air the game. While this phenomena isn't new, consumers are worried about what it could mean for big games in the future. Being forced to sign up for a new subscription service for every playoff game is not what consumers want and not where we should be headed. Too many consumers, myself included, understand the frustration of flipping through app after app, only to find out you need to buy a new subscription to watch the game. And as annoying as that can be, it doesn't even begin to capture the angered consumer's face when they realize the game isn't available anywhere because of a blackout. It's not fair and it shouldn't be happening. But it's also important to remember the restrictions streamers face in distributing this content. They're subject to the terms dictated by major sports leagues. So rather than focusing on any one game or specific incident, I think members of the committee shouldn't lose sight of the broader market dynamics at play. That's why I'm glad we're having this hearing today. I'm excited to hear from our witnesses about the ways we can increase access and affordability of sports. With that, I yield the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much. The gentle yields back, and at this time, the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington, the chair of the full Committee of Energy and Commerce, for 5 minutes for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Latta, and good morning, everyone. To all of our witnesses, welcome. Today's hearing is the second this subcommittee has held to evaluate the rapidly evolving landscape of the media marketplace. Americans have more choices than ever on how, when, and where they watch content, as well as how much content they watch. And we've seen a profound shift in people's viewing habits, especially as streaming services have become more available and reliable. For decades, the only option available were over-the-air television and cable services, where people could watch live TV at a scheduled time on a television. Now, streaming platforms allow people to watch whatever they want, whenever they want, whether that's on a TV or on the go using a phone, computer, tablet, or any device that has access to the internet. Streaming platforms have reshaped our entertainment habits, made our lives more convenient, and diversified the content available. And that's why the way we watch sports, which has undergone significant changes in recent years and shifted the dynamics of who owns media, sports media rights. Professional sports leagues, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL, are pillars of American culture. For decades, these leagues have broadcast their games over the air and used television to help expand their reach into homes across the country. It allowed every American to attend their local team's home game for free. With the introduction of cable TV and later satellite, the number of channels and local options for consumers increased significantly, allowing even more sports coverage. Since then, television networks have historically held the majority of sports rights, allowing them to shape how viewers experience live sporting events. More recently, however, this marketplace has undergone a transformational change, shifting from only traditional broadcast and cable TV to streaming services. Major sports leagues are now entering into lucrative deals with online platforms. Just this year alone, Peacock hosted the first ever streaming-only NFL playoff game. Amazon Prime entered into a deal with regional sports networks to air MLB, NBA, and NHL games, and Netflix became the new home to WWE. The traditional cable TV model is no longer the only gateway to live sports content. People's personal preferences are also a key factor in this transition to online platforms. Sports fans now have the freedom to choose services that align with their preferences, whether it's live streaming, on-demand highlights, or exclusive behind-the-scenes footage. Sports leagues recognize that they need to meet fans where they are, which is why they're quickly moving online. However, an increasing number of viewing options has also made it more complicated for some people to find the sporting event that they're looking for. A recent study found 30% of sports fans didn't know which channel was airing their preferred event. Customers may also have to purchase different subscriptions just to watch their team play. And that means games that have been traditionally free, depending upon where people live, could now be too expensive for them to afford. And even with all these streaming options available, the vast majority of fans still tune in to network television rather than streaming to watch live sports. As we prepare for Super Bowl 57, it's important that we reflect on the evolving sports media landscape and how to ensure the fans' experience continues to be prioritized. Today's discussion will provide members with the opportunity to discuss this and other issues, as well as improve our understanding of the current status of the marketplace. We will hear expert insight into the evolution of sports media marketplace, as well as potential steps that Congress can take to ensure outdated regulations do not hinder innovation and competition. And I look forward to the discussion, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. Today we'll examine the impact that sports programming has on the media marketplace. Unlike other things that seem to divide people, sports has the ability to unite. And whether it's going to watch your hometown team or gathering with friends and family on Super Bowl Sunday, a lot of people's free time in this country involves sports and athletic events. Sports programming also fuels the media economy, drawing attention and dollars. Sports stands alone as the last remaining must-watch programming that people want to view live as it happens. And last year, we had a hearing to examine the evolving video marketplace. We discussed how the transformation of the media landscape is dramatically impacting consumers' options and the prices they pay to view content. Sports programming is at the core of this transformation. The value of sports media rights has remained a boon for media outlets, supporting legacy programming for traditional television networks and competitive news services alike. And at the same time, it's been a major driver of rising consumer prices. Broadcasters want sports programming to sell advertising and increase the value of their retransmission consent fees, which generates revenues for station operations and the production of local news. Multi-channel video programming distributors like cable and satellite TV providers want sports programming to hold together their channel bundles and keep growing their customer bases. And many online streaming services see sports programming as must-have content to attract subscribers behind paywalls, allowing their service to stand out from the crowded competitive landscape at a time when many consumers are looking to cut costs rather than add new ones. In some ways, then, it's never been a better time for consumers to watch sports. Numerous platforms mean competition and options. This means more televised sporting events and the ability to highlight a wide variety of sports. It has also contributed to an unprecedented rise in viewership for programming that is deserving of more attention, such as women's sports. Unfortunately, we're also beginning to see signs of consumer frustration. Subscription fatigue is set in as the proliferation of different options means multiple services are needed to follow our favorite team over the season. Sometimes business disputes lead to TV blackouts, which hit consumers particularly hard in local markets where geographic exclusivity can make it impossible to watch a local game. Escalating sports licensing fees have been a major driver of increasing pay TV costs, even for consumers who don't watch sports. And this has contributed to cord cutting, and the rise of online streaming options, including games that are aired exclusively online, has caused significant confusion amongst consumers, with 60% saying they have trouble finding the games that they want to watch. And we can't forget that the full range of options is only available to people who have a high-quality, reliable broadband connection, which is a separate subscription and yet another monthly fee. Unfortunately, the digital divide persists, and whether due to affordability or availability, a broadband subscription sufficient to stream live sports often remains out of reach. It's just another reason that bipartisan programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program and the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program are necessary to allow all of us to participate in modern society and communal events like sports events. It's critical that we come together to extend funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program to ensure that millions of American families can still have affordable access to the internet. And finally, if sports program is the lifeblood of our media ecosystem, we must ask what it means if this valuable content increasingly moves from local broadcast stations to national platforms like most streaming services. Legacy broadcast media are our most trusted providers of local news and our most widely available source of critical emergency information. We should examine the implications of a significant revenue generator like sports programming moving off the free airwaves and what this will mean for the future of local news. And the evolving video market is complex, and it's more important than ever to put consumers first and make sure that they're getting the information they need and not being ripped off. My focus will remain on consumers and how to uphold the timeless principle of competition, localism, and diversity in the Communications Act. And while it's true that our habits may be changing, our values are not. Our greatest challenge here is to determine how to carry these values forward as our technologies and the dominant business models change. So, a lot to discuss. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. And this concludes member opening statements. The chair reminds members that pursuant to the committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. The chair again wants to thank our witnesses for being with us today to testify before the subcommittee. Our witnesses will have 5 minutes to provide an opening statement, which will be followed by a round of questions from the members. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we do have another subcommittee of Energy and Commerce going on right now, so we're going to have members coming in and out during the day. The witnesses before us today are Brian Lawlor, President of Scripps Sports, John Bergmayer, the Legal Director at Public Knowledge, Rob Thun, the Chief Content Officer at DirecTV, and John Ourand, the Sports Correspondent at Puck News. I also want to note for our witnesses that there's a timer light on the table which will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining and will turn red when your time has expired. And Mr. Lawlor, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Lada, Ranking Member Matsui, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify before you today. My name is Brian Lawlor, and I'm the president of Scripps Sports, part of the 145-year-old E.W. Scripps Company. Previously, I oversaw a portfolio of Scripps local TV stations in many states, including California and Ohio, in Cleveland, where our company was started, and Cincinnati, where we're now headquartered. Scripps has always believed strongly in our duty to serve communities through our quality, objective local journalism. Our local broadcast stations and our national networks reach nearly every American household, both over the air for free and on numerous cable, satellite, digital, and streaming platforms. In December 2022, Scripps launched a standalone sports division, Scripps Sports. Scripps Sports uses our local TV stations and our national broadcast networks to provide sports teams and leagues the ability to reach their fans more directly and more broadly. During the first year of Scripps Sports, we have achieved a series of notable successes, benefiting sports fans around the country with a particular focus on advancing women's sports. Thus far, we've partnered with the WNBA and the National Women's Soccer League, creating a unique franchise night for both leagues. In local markets, we've acquired the broadcast rights to the Vegas Golden Knights and the Arizona Coyotes of the NHL and the NCAA's Big Sky Conference, increasing the viewership of all. We're living through a rapidly shifting media marketplace. Americans are cutting the traditional pay TV cord and moving toward alternative services. While sports on pay platforms are not new, the trend of moving sports from broadcast platforms to paid services has been met with fan objections. This has made it difficult for fans to watch in many cases, in finding the games, the expense, or logistical challenges. Our goal is to serve fans, and we can only do so if broadcast stations are part of the equation. More than 20% of Scripps households now receive our stations through cable replacement services, known as virtual MVPDs. As we expect this trend will continue to expand, we strongly support the FCC refreshing its virtual MVPD record, just as this committee is examining the streaming marketplace and its impact on broadcast localism. It's important that local fans can view local channels with local sports. Make no mistake, the changing landscape also creates increased broadcast viewership opportunities. The most important genres for linear television, sports and live news, are on broadcast TV. Americans appreciate being able to get this programming on their local channels, especially those offered free over the air. No other platform has been able to duplicate what broadcasters do. At Scripps, we're using the national reach of over-the-air distribution of ION to establish a consistent national home for sports, deserving increased visibility. We have already established ION as a leading brand for women's sports. In our first season with the WNBA, viewership on ION surpassed networks like NBA TV and ESPN2, and even bested ESPN on a weekly basis. Our local opportunities arose from significant challenges faced by the Regional Sports Network, or RSN system. RSNs have lost significant distribution over the last several years, with some teams only reaching 35 or 40% of their home markets. Scripps is working with leagues and teams to offer an alternative that would provide long-term consistency and full market reach. We expect that to continue to expand. In conclusion, as American sports fans, leagues, and teams navigate the fragmented and seemingly uncertain future of the sports media marketplace, viewers are turning to a trusted home, broadcast television. Americans have a deep connection with their hometown teams, and our local stations bring them this coverage. These stations are available to viewers for free, over the air, and must remain so. In this competitive landscape, where some sports are increasingly more expensive and inaccessible to many, Congress should reject calls to undermine retransmission consent, which is essential for local broadcasters' ability to invest in local sports and news. Americans deserve a healthy broadcast option, and Scripps is proud to help bring that to them. Again, thank you for inviting me today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you for your opening statement. And Mr. Bergmayer, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to the viewer and fan perspective on streaming video and streaming sports in particular. The breaking apart of the cable bundle has brought significant benefits to viewers and fans, but cost, convenience, and quality can suffer. There are concrete steps that every player in this marketplace can take to eliminate or minimize these. The benefits of online video are clear. Streaming video has benefited viewers by offering cheaper, more convenient access to content compared to traditional cable and satellite services. Viewers can choose individual services rather than being forced into expensive bundles. People are not locked into long contracts and can sign up for and cancel services with ease. What industry executives call churn, viewers call flexibility and freedom. They can also access video on devices of their choice and follow smaller and niche sports thanks to streaming. However, the proliferation of streaming services has also led to rising costs as content becomes fragmented across multiple apps. Viewers feel they broke free of cable bundles only to see them reemerge in streaming. The cost of subscribing to multiple services can quickly add up, and managing accounts, subscriptions, and apps across services creates inconvenience. Important public interest goals like accessibility, local content, and emergency information are sometimes neglected. These issues are acute with sports streaming. Fans may need to subscribe to multiple services to follow a league or team. Confusing blackout restrictions mean games available in one market might not be in another. Poor broadband can lead to low video quality, and streaming introduces lag, so viewers learn of plays on social media before seeing them live. Problems are significant with major professional sports, given their cultural and economic importance. Many games once freely available are now on paid streaming. Streaming services increasingly use sports to attract and retain subscribers. There are things that sports and media companies can do to minimize these problems. Growing pains are to be expected. By noting and addressing them now, the industry can avoid repeating the mistakes that made cable TV companies among the most unpopular in America. The focus should be on customer experience over lock-in. Services should understand that people will obtain video from multiple sources, and services should focus on providing value rather than making it more difficult for viewers to leave. Bundles should offer clear value. Apps should aim for consistency and simplicity, and it's in the interest of the entire industry to help viewers with the subscription fatigue issue, which was already mentioned today. Sports leagues should avoid abrupt, complex changes in carriage deals, and teams and sports should avoid fragmenting games across different services and media. Any short-term financial gains from these complex licensing deals are not worth the long-term cost and fan annoyance. Policymakers have a role as well. Much media regulation is premised on addressing the challenges of particular technologies and business models, such as cable TV or broadcast. Oversight of these practices will remain vital, as millions of viewers still rely on these services and will for many years to come. But differences between cable and streaming mean that certain regulatory approaches are not applicable. But the goals of competition, diversity, localism, and affordability, and the need for accessible programming remain the same, even if the way these can be brought about has changed. There are some obvious hooks for policymakers to improve things for viewers in the short term. Taxpayer-funded teams should commit to making games available in their local markets on a free ad-supported basis, either through broadcast or streaming. Further, policymakers should review special legal protections some sports get, such as antitrust exemptions, and ensure they are conditioned on teams putting fans first. Competition authorities should pay special attention to media industries where consolidation can raise prices and reduce the availability of programming. And subcommittees like this one, as well as the FCC and FTC, should monitor this marketplace. Streaming is no longer brand new, nor a promising competitive alternative, but the way that millions of viewers primarily watch TV, and it can no longer be an afterthought. While streaming brings great convenience, fragmentation and rising costs have led to complexity that hurts viewer satisfaction. This is clear with sports streaming and issues like blackouts, quality, and lag. I hope this hearing can help inform the subcommittee on the challenges facing viewers, as well as the leagues, teams, and media companies. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your opening statement. Mr. Thun, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Subcommittee Chairman Lada, Ranking Member Matsui, and members of the subcommittee for allowing me to testify before you today. My name is Rob Thun. I'm the Chief Content Officer at DirecTV. DirecTV has been the market leader in sports for years, and that sports programming is very important to many of our subscribers. The sports media landscape is rapidly changing, so we are happy to see the subcommittee taking the time to discuss the potential issues in front of us. Today, I want to talk about some components of that changing landscape and why some of those changes may be harmful to consumers. First, key sports properties continue to migrate from pay TV to direct consumer platforms, or as we call it, D2C. Second, the migration of local sports from RSNs to broadcasting will make such programming unavailable to many people who receive it today and increase costs to all customers under a broadcast model. Third, both migrations make pay TV less valuable, which will endanger the leagues, broadcasters, and consumers alike. Sports migration to D2C troubles us. Valuable sports programming that used to be available to our subscribers is now moving outside of pay TV to D2C. Examples are many, which include UFC to ESPN+, the NFL's Thursday night package on Amazon Prime, an NFL regular season and playoff game on Peacock, an international NFL game on ESPN+, Major League Baseball's Friday night games on Apple+, New York Yankees games on Amazon Prime, and all of the Major League Soccer games exclusively on Apple+. Despite the loss of these expensive sports properties and more, pay TV wasn't given a rebate for these content losses. Instead, the prices broadcasters and programmers demand continue to march higher. These migrations have resulted in customer anger and confusion. People don't like hunting for games that they thought they had once already paid for, and they don't intuitively know where to find these games and often have trouble setting up new subscriptions. This doesn't just impact our residential subscribers, it impacts our commercial subscribers as well. 97% of DirecTV's hotels, bars, and restaurant customers couldn't broadcast the Chiefs-Dolphins playoff game to their patrons because they didn't have the technical capability to deliver the game via Peacock streaming app. The migration of regional sports to broadcast also concerns us. Regional sports networks are exactly what the name says. They're regional in nature, whose territories are designated by the leagues of the underlying teams. RSNs used to be a great business, but now they're struggling. Given the expensive nature of RSNs and the limited customer viewership, new distributors such as YouTube TV and Hulu opted to carry only some RSNs, while Dish decided to drop them altogether. With fixed rights fees that increase annually, in the backdrop of declining pay TV subs and revenues, some RSNs filed for bankruptcy and are trying to reemerge or close down altogether. This has put some local team rights on the market, and broadcasters are opportunistically looking to step into the fray. The migration from RSNs to broadcasting will harm viewers. First, I want to be clear that the moving these rights to broadcasting doesn't mean everyone gets local sports for free. Make no mistake, broadcasters are seeking license fees from distributors, and they expect us to pay for these rights, which will ultimately be borne by subscribers. Many subscribers who used to get their teams from RSNs won't have access via broadcasters. First, many people can't get clean over-the-air reception. It's the reason the pay TV industry came into existence. Second, broadcasters in many cases plan to carry these games on multicast channels, which DirecTV cannot carry. Third, not one single broadcaster has stations to cover a team's entire distribution footprint. As such, they'll have to syndicate these rights to other broadcasters, and as we sit here today, none of the teams currently licensed by broadcasters has a complete team coverage that the RSNs used to deliver. Many people who don't want sports would have to pay for it under this model. We worked hard to carry RSNs in our higher choice package so that people who didn't want sports didn't have to pay for it. Broadcasters, by contrast, require carriage on the most basic package. Effectively, all of our subscribers will be required to pay for these rights. Both kinds of migration will harm the video and sports ecosystem. People usually switch from pay TV either because they can't get the program they want or because they're asked to pay unreasonable rates for programming they don't want. Higher prices will lead to higher subscriber churn. That is the reality. If this happens, broadcasters, teams, and leagues will have to find a replacement for pay TV revenues, which have been the lifeblood for broadcasting and sports revenues for years. Nobody yet knows how they will do that. Absent a solution that involves all of us working together, I don't know how the American public will continue to receive the wealth of sports programming it's come to expect. I hope that we can collectively work towards a solution. Thank you for your time.
And thank you very much for your opening statement. And Mr. Ourand, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Chairman Lada, and you, Ranking Member Matsui. This is my first time in this role, and so it's truly an honor to be here to testify in front of you. I spent 18 years as the reporter for Sports Business Journal. I'm now with Puck News. So my opening statement, I want to just sort of talk about the market overall as it is. And what has been described here is a rapidly evolving landscape I view as really chaos. There's an unmistakable trend right now going from traditional linear television to streaming platforms. Because of that trend, it's taking a lot of money out of the sports marketplace because the streaming services aren't paying as much as the pay TV services, which were actually built for that. And so where are we seeing the chaos? One of the 5 biggest college conferences, the Pac-12 network, described as the College of Champions, has utterly collapsed because it wasn't able to find a TV deal that would that would keep the universities within that conference afloat. And so most of the universities ended up going to the Big Ten, to the ACC. There are Atlantic Coast Conference schools on the West Coast now because of that, the Big 12 as well. We've talked also about Diamond Sports going into bankruptcy. They operate the Bally Sports, regional sports networks. They're trying to come out of bankruptcy, but it does speak to the regional sports networks and the problem there. But it's not just Diamond Sports. There's also Warner Brother Discovery Sports. They owned about 4 different RSNs in the country, and they decided it was better just to shut down those RSNs rather than to try to sell them or move forward with them. So there are big problems in the business right now. Where we are currently reminds me of the cable industry back in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. In, I think it's 1987 or 88, in the late 1980s, the NFL decided to sell a package of games, Sunday night games, to Turner Broadcasting. They were on TNT and to ESPN. So they took a package that was on local broadcast TV and put it into a pay TV service. So people had to pay in order to get those games. Back in the early 1990s, ESPN wanted to launch ESPN2, a second cable channel. How did they launch a second channel? They put one of the most popular college basketball games, Duke versus North Carolina, on ESPN2 in order to get consumers complaining to their cable system so that they could end up covering that. The cable business, the whole pay TV business, has been a great boon for the entire sports business. I happen to be an Orioles fan who lives in Washington, D.C. I watch the Orioles on Masson. And then when I walk my dog down the street and I look into other people's windows, nobody else is watching the Orioles, but all of my neighbors are helping to subsidize my addiction to watch that team. And I thank them for that. The one thing is that my final point that I want to make is that broadcast still is a priority to these leagues. I know we're going to talk a lot about the Peacock game. They carried exclusively an NFL game. That game was available on a local over-the-air station as well. All NFL games are going to be on over-the-air broadcast television into the 2030s. The NBA Finals, they're redoing their deals. Those are certainly going to be on broadcast television. The World Series is going to be on broadcast television, going through its deal. I think you can also look at just traditional linear television. The NHL, every single Stanley Cup final game until the end of its contract is going to be on linear television. All of the big college conferences, the SEC is going to be with ESPN. Games are going to be on ABC. ACC, Big Ten, all of them are predicated on traditional linear television. I'm going to yield the rest of my time, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. And that concludes our witnesses' opening statements. And we will now begin questionings from the members. And I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Ourand, and in recent years, what is the most significant change, as you just went through things, but what would you consider the most significant change that you've seen in sports media in the recent years?
That's a good question. I'm going to say take it outside of media and outside of sports media. I'm going to answer your question as media, and certainly the rise of streaming services like Netflix, like Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV Plus. What has happened in the pay TV business is that people that are not sports fans, that like entertainment programming, they've already cut the cord. And so if you think about your own personally, how you watch television, when was the last time you sat down and watched a serial on broadcast TV with commercials? Most people are binging on Netflix or binging on Apple TV Plus. And so I think the most significant change has been the cord cutting that has happened because of that. And right now, I think one of the reasons that we're focused on sports is that sports fans are the last bastion holding the pay TV system together, in my opinion.
Well, let me just follow up then. So how does this impact the way that sports content's being distributed then, since after you just made that statement?
You're certainly seeing a slow migration of sports to streaming services. Amazon Prime has Thursday Night Football exclusively. Apple TV, they have Major League Soccer, and they own all the rights to Major League Soccer. We just last week, Netflix did a deal for WWE programming. I'm not sure if we consider that sports or not, but so we are slowly seeing that happen. One point that I do want to make is that all of those deals that went to streaming services, there were no TV networks that were sort of stepping up to make those deals. So those were ones that didn't make financial sense for a lot of the TV networks that exist.
Well, thank you. Mr. Thun, sports rights are now being dispersed across a variety of mediums. If the distribution of sports content continues down its current path, how do you see the consumers responding to the changes?
I think it's more of the chaos that we saw during the wild card game, that people didn't know where to go. They didn't have their subscriptions ready. There will be people who are disenfranchised who won't have the technical capabilities to get the games themselves, or the knowledge as to where to get it and how to subscribe to it. So, look, the sports are proliferating to these streaming platforms because pay TV isn't what it used to be. And so they're looking to, the rights owners are looking to diversify where their rights go, but in the process of that, they are alienating certain customers who do subscribe to pay TV, who now have to pony up to subscribe to these various services to get the complete set of sports that they used to get. And that's leading to frustration. And while you do have the ability to toggle in and out of your subscriptions at a cheaper price, I think today we've seen that more customers have subscriptions that now equal what they used to pay for pay TV through the combination of all the over-the-top or direct-to-consumer products that they subscribe to. So what was thought to be a cheaper, better alternative hasn't really turned out to be that way when you look at the totality of all the subscriptions these subscribers have. So it's as John pointed out, it's a little bit chaotic.
Well, thank you. Mr. Lawlor, in my last minute, what are the benefits of putting local sports games on broadcast?
Well, I think the biggest benefit is reach. So, Mr. Ourand was talking about cord cutting having the biggest impact, and I think that's what we have seen in talking to leagues and teams. The most dramatic difference that exists today in sports versus a decade ago is reach. Whether it's the leagues, except for the NFL, which has over-the-air broadcast on almost for all of their teams and the league, but most other leagues are on either ESPN or Turner, and as we've seen through cord cutting, they're reaching a lot less U.S. households. And then in local markets, regional sports networks 10 years ago was a terrific business. It would reach 80% of all the households in the markets. Today, when we're meeting with teams, they talk about reaching 35–40% of all the households in the markets. And so to be an owner of a NHL or an NBA team and to not be able to put your games in front of 2/3 of your fans in your home market is a dramatic change. And I think that's the benefit of over-the-air broadcast. Between cable, satellite, and our over-the-air platform, we're able to reach every household in a DMA. And of course, it's free over the air.
Well, thank you very much. My time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for her questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Streaming services have created new ways for consumers to access the content they want more cheaply and conveniently than with traditional arrangements. This means more control over the type of content they pay for and flexibility on how they access it. However, it also can fracture access to teams or sports across multiple platforms, driving costs for consumers. Mr. Bergmayer, can this need for multiple subscription services mitigate some of the benefits of cutting the cord?
I think it does, and I think it's worth pointing out. Sports have always been sometimes you'd have to change channels to watch a different game. A different media company would buy the rights; it would be on a different channel. Well, that's kind of easy. People know how to change channels. I think one of the big it's not just you have to flip to another app. It's the platforms that users have to navigate. Smart TVs, Roku, Apple TV, they all work differently, so it's very hard to just give uniform instructions to tell people how to do it. They might need to first set up an account with Apple or with the smart TV company, set up an account on the Samsung App Store or what have you, then install that, and then set up yet another account with that. So I think even if it seems like, what's the big deal? It's just different apps, you install an app. Just think through the experience and think, even trying to help, at least for me, trying to help people who are less technically savvy through these things, maybe over the phone, it could be very challenging. So I absolutely agree. The cost issue is pretty significant. I think online is still better than the cable bundle in terms of cost, but this inconvenience, I think, is really a sore point for consumers.
Right, and I understand that perfectly, because, once my son left for college, it was kind of hard to figure out all this. And you're going to plan ahead more, you just can't do it.
Yeah,
like
you couldn't
like
give them
to do
tech
it.
support.
Yeah. While most big games are available over the air in local markets or on platform, increasing games are fragmented, as we said, across multiple platforms. This means consumers are increasingly forced to pay twice for the content they used to get in one place. In extreme cases, single games are exclusively available in one platform if the rights holder chooses to restrict access. Mr. Thun, do you think these exclusive deals, what do they think these exclusive deals mean for consumer access? And do you have concerns about what this trend might mean for sports fans in the future?
Well, I think we talked about a little bit that the recent Dolphins-Chiefs game was challenging for a lot of subscribers and as the numbers proved out, what many thought to be the game of the weekend was the lowest rated game of all of them. It should have been the highest viewed if it was on broadcast. But it wasn't. Now, I guess, and to Mr. Ourand's point, just to be technical about it, the Chiefs were shown in Kansas City, and the Dolphins and the games were shown in Kansas City and Miami. But everywhere else in the country, they weren't.
Right.
So you had to go get it through Peacock. Peacock is using it as a vehicle to drive people into that subscription.
Sure.
And the NFL did the deal with them so that they could use that to tout people to come into the Peacock subscription.
Absolutely.
Much of the content that's in Peacock, to your point earlier, customers are already paying for it. Probably the lion's share of the content that's in Peacock is available through the subscription of DirecTV and other pay TV providers.
Yeah.
So in those instances where they use one game as a carrot to bring people in, it is frustrating for customers because if they go through the app and see what other content is in there to discover, not all of it's really new and fresh to them. They've already got it through their pay TV.
Okay. I want to talk about women's sports. For too long, bad faith arguments about profitability and lack of interest have been made against women's sports. I introduced the Goals Act, which eventually led to pay equity between the men's and women's national soccer teams. While this was a step in the right direction, we have a lot of work ahead of us to promote equitable access to games and fair compensation for athletes. Mr. Lawlor, can you discuss the role of WNBA and National Women's Soccer Leagues in Scripps' footprint, and do you see them as an opportunity for growth moving forward?
Thank you for the question. We're really excited about using the ION platform to showcase women's sports. As I said in my prepared remarks, this is a priority of the company. We bought ION during the pandemic, and the prior owner did not have a sports strategy, so there was no sports on ION. It's the 5th highest rated broadcast network in America. And so after we acquired it, we spent some time sort of looking at the sports landscape to see if ION had a place to play in sports. And one of the things that we identified was it's really hard to be a women's sports fan in America because it's impossible to find with any consistency where these games are, and very often only one game a week, 2 games a week would be on national television, and it would typically be require a cable subscription.
Right.
We identified women's sports as an opportunity for our company. We acquired the rights for all Friday night games for the WNBA. Last season was our first season, and we lifted the reach of the WNBA by 30%. And as I said earlier, there were many weeks where we were beating ESPN with our ratings. This year, we'll expand that. We're going to add a live studio show, so it's almost going to look like the NFL and giving women and women's sports that notoriety. And now we're part of the new National Women's Soccer League deal.
Wow.
Ourselves are partners with CBS, with Amazon, and with ESPN.
Wow.
We'll have 50 nights, 25 weeks. Again, national platform over the air. The entire country can see for free women's sports.
I thank you very much. I went over. I just wanted to hear more of that. I will be back.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
The gentlelady from Washington, the chair of the full committee, is recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Mr. Thun, the AFC wildcard matchup was aired exclusively on the streaming service Peacock. And this is a prime example of the transition from sports content moving from traditional cable and broadcasting to streaming. Do you think consumers should expect more of these streaming-only games?
Unfortunately, yes. I think that direct consumer apps are going to use these tentpole events as a vehicle to drive people into their experiences to see if they can drive higher subscriptions. And that's going to come at the expense of the games that came out of pay TV.
Yep.
So it's going to lead to more frustration as subscribers who used to get that game as part of their subscription with us now have to go out and sign up for, in this case, Peacock.
Would you speak to how this change is different from how NFL games have been viewed historically?
Well, NFL games historically have had full range of broadcast partners. They've had their own network, the NFL Network, distributing games. They had ESPN distributing games, and that was all contained within pay TV. The lion's share being with the broadcasters of Fox, NBC, and CBS. As the NFL's expanded its season and added new games, they've opportunistically taken some of those games and used that as vehicles to provide or opportunities for these streamers to then buy these exclusive games and put them into those apps. And that's going to lead to further fragmentation, further frustration, and higher bills for consumers.
Thank you. Mr. Ourand, big tech companies are now getting heavily involved in live sports with Apple's carriage of Major League Soccer, Amazon's Thursday Night Football, and Alphabet's purchase of NFL Red Zone. Would you speak to how big tech's entry into this space is changing the sports media landscape?
It certainly is changing the sports media landscape because it's getting a lot of those games. But to use your Peacock example, I know that's not big tech, but it is streaming. That doesn't mitigate how much of the NFL is on broadcast television, and so it's a small step going there. I think that you're clearly seeing trend lines heading there, but it's not quite a tidal wave yet.
Okay. Mr. Lawlor, I wanted to follow up on where the ranking member was going, recognizing that Scripps has the national broadcasting rights for National Women's Soccer League and Women's National Basketball League. And I'm pleased, too, that women's sports are getting more primetime attention. Would you speak to the evolving marketplace and just, if you believe this is going to offer more options for women's sports, or with this evolving marketplace, do you think it's going to put the future of women's sports at risk?
I definitely think it's going to present more opportunity for women's and women's sports. We've been tracking the viewership and the engagement with women's sports now for a couple of years, and it seems like every time there is a game on, we're reporting record ratings. Basketball, volleyball, gymnastics. These are incredible athletes, and the problem is nobody's just been able to see them, except in local markets where you have to be on campus in an arena. So we're really excited to have the opportunity to use our platform to showcase women's sports. I think the new announcement with the NCAA and ESPN where their championship agreement brings many of the women's finals to broadcast television to ABC, is another example of the opportunity around women's sports. We're making a massive investment. I don't think any company in America has made a larger investment in women's sports and showcasing women's sports than Scripps has in the last year. Three things need to happen. Number one, you need distribution and visibility. It'll be over the air on ION, fully distributed in every market, over the air as well as cable, satellite, fast. So we've accomplished that. The next thing is we need brands to engage. So we're meeting with a lot of brands right now, trying to bring in sponsors to help support it. And then we need fans. We've seen the growth of fans. We just broadcast the NWSL draft on broadcast for the first time ever. Had a huge success there, following our WNBA next year. So we feel like everything's aligning. We might be a little bit ahead of the opportunity, but we think by showcasing it again, creating a franchise night, Friday night, every week during the season, the only place to see WNBA over-the-air broadcast television. 25 weeks, 50 games, NWSL, we see the same opportunity. And the fact that young ladies can now find their superstars and know every week where to find it, we think creating that, that habit will create fandom.
Thank you. I know my daughters are excited.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to start with Mr. Ourand, because you you're the first to report on the $1.7 billion sale of the Baltimore Orioles, and part of that sale includes the local media rights and the regional sports network co-owned by the Orioles and the Washington Nationals. I know it's still developing, but could you share a bit more about the complex media rights in our market and speak generally on the value of media rights in similar deals, and how might this sale change the way fans who watch the Orioles and Nationals in our area access games?
First of all, thank you very much for bringing up that story that I broke yesterday. I did not cede that question with you, so I appreciate that. In the D.C. market, there's a Mid-Atlantic sports network that was created when the Washington Nationals came to town, the Orioles, the neighboring Orioles, own most of the network. And that was a way to get the Orioles. That was a way that Major League Baseball got the Orioles to say okay to let the Nationals come in, because the Orioles had owned the D.C. market. And in fact, if you go to Orioles games now, you never see Virginia license plates or D.C. license plates up there, because they all go to Nationals games. That was something that was, in my opinion, a way for Major League Baseball to kick the can down the road. Like, let's create something here and we'll figure it out. And here we are 20 years later, and nothing has been figured out on that. Now the Orioles own about 3/4 of it. The Nationals own 1/4 of it. It's unclear exactly what's happening with it, but if a couple of billionaires have decided to buy the Baltimore Orioles, you can be certain that there is some sort of resolution with Masson in that.
Well, thank you. But, the problem is that I see in general is that the market is driven by these business deals between massive companies, worth billions of dollars, and I worry that consumers can be overlooked. So maybe I'll just ask anybody. I don't want to spend my whole 5 minutes on this, but would anybody want to discuss how the changes in this marketplace would improve? Well, are there any changes in the marketplace that would improve the consumer experience? Maybe one of you take a shot at that, if you would. Yeah, you mentioned this, so if
Yes, thank you, Congressman. Look, I think, the fragmentation and cord cutting that's happened has really had a dramatic impact on the regional sports networks. And so properties where, the New Jersey Devils or the Nets or the Knicks and many others, have seen dramatic declines in their overall reach. This has provided an opportunity for local broadcasters to come in and offer a solution. The Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Stanley Cup champions, were in the middle of a contract with AT&T Sportsnet, where AT&T informed them that they would no longer fulfill the remaining years of that. That opened up the opportunity. Our company was able to come in and acquire the rights to the Golden Knights, and we put them on over-the-air free television. The Golden Knights ratings have doubled this season. We see, much deeper engagement and more fans, not only in Las Vegas, but through Reno, through Idaho, through Montana, are able to access games free over the air. So many more fans are able to see these games than before. So I think the changes that are happening with the regional sports networks do provide an opportunity for benefit to fans.
All right, thanks. But, I'm still worried that the entry of big tech to the sports media marketplace and the shift of content to online streaming, creates another, problem for consumers. I mean, let me ask this because I'm going to run out of time. Mr. Bergmayer, what are some of the consumer privacy risks inherent in moving video content online, and would a national privacy law help mitigate possible harms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would. And video has long been an area of special privacy interest. We have the VPPA, the Cable Act has specific privacy provisions. And I think with online video, it's just inherent to the nature of how it works that they know where you are, what you're watching, and how long you're watching it. That's partially true of cable, since cable is no longer just an analog medium. They can track what you do via set-top boxes. But the level of granularity that online video services have to people's viewing habits is very strong. And it's really hard to discuss even how to address video-specific privacy issues, without a national framework in place.
All right. I think I've run out of time, so thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan's 5th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the panel for being here. Last night, Michigan versus Michigan State basketball, major rivalry game in my district and D.C. office as well, was streamed exclusively on Peacock. I understand if games are only available on streaming for those currently out of state like me and my D.C. staff, but my constituents back in Michigan didn't have access to the game on local channels either. Even those students in East Lansing and Ann Arbor couldn't watch unless they paid another streaming service. Peacock struck a deal with the Big Ten for 8 conference football games and 52 conference men's and women's basketball games to be exclusively streamed. This also includes an exclusive deal for 2 games each for the Big Ten's men's and women's tournaments. I understand that it's a free market and we should keep it that way, but this suddenly feels like pay-per-view for college games. When people pay for cable or VMVPD subscriptions or even over-the-air antennas, they do so believing they will have access to their local games at the very least. In September, I had to listen to the first national champion U of M football game on radio. This is especially problematic in rural districts like mine, where many of my constituents lack access to reliable, high-speed broadband. Not everybody has the ability to watch these games, even if they can afford to. So, Mr. Lawlor, what are the benefits of continuing to offer games locally on affiliate networks while streaming, like many of the professional sports are doing, versus switching entirely to streaming regardless of location?
Thank you for the question. I can tell you our company owns TV stations in Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Lansing, and so this is a topic of conversation inside of our company as well. I think part of the last several decades has been a lot of people with sports rights play defense, and they wanted to make sure that they were the only place to be able to be viewed. Regional sports networks would be one of them, where they had the rights to distribute a game in a market, but there were no other opportunities for streaming. MLB TV is a great example, where you would have to buy the rights to see, with Bally's or somebody else to see the game. But if you bought MLB TV in your market, in Grand Rapids, for example, you could see every game for every team for the entire season, but you couldn't see the Detroit Tigers. Mm-hmm. We currently believe that there's an opportunity to do both. We do think that over-the-air broadcast, that visibility, making games available to fans is really important. But I referenced earlier our partnership with the Vegas Golden Knights, the Stanley Cup champions. In Vegas, we have the broadcast rights. There are 82 NHL games a season. We have 69 games that we produce and distribute live over the air. The other 13 are on national TV. And every one of the games that we distribute, we've partnered with the team to create a streaming service where fans can subscribe to get it. And what that allows is anywhere they are in their life, their ability within the market, it's geo-fenced, but if they're, if the Golden Knights are playing a game against the Red Wings, that would be a 7 o'clock start in Detroit. It's a 4 o'clock game in Las Vegas. There's only so many people who can be home in front of a television at 4 o'clock. What this allows people to do is if they're sitting on the sideline of their kid's soccer practice, they get to catch the first 2 periods there. They're now fully engaged in the game. They're driving home. They listen to third period on the radio, turn on the TV while they're having dinner. It's a great consumer experience, and it's great for fans. So we don't think it has to be either or. We think there's a broadcast mechanism as well as a streaming that can complement each other.
Expansion considering the fans. Mr. Ourand, what is the objective behind putting some popular games on streaming only?
Money. The NBC paid the NFL $110 million for the rights to the wild card game. NBC and Comcast have a vested interest in building up Peacock. It's a big part of their service, and the NFL has a vested interest in wanting Peacock to grow as well, so that it will become a bidder the next time the rights come up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting out that secret. And I wish I had more time to delve, but I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 33rd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I'm glad that we're really having this discussion as this landscape just seems to be changing so rapidly. And, I was thinking about when I was a kid, and one of the biggest controversies as it came to broadcast sports was who got to be a superstation. And I can literally remember being in high school, and I got to learn about this guy named Ryan Sandberg, that spelled his name with an E, and Andre the Hawk Dawson, and I got to watch them play because they were on WGN, and we could watch that in Fort Worth. We were a regional superstation, KTVT, before they became a CBS affiliate, but they were, that was, and I remember it was controversial, like who was going to get to be the next superstation. And then even thinking back before that, I was, a lot of the discussion around here, around DEI and what the Republicans call wokeism, one of the biggest discussions around that back in the day was whether or not blacks got to play quarterback. And in our neighborhood, we had a guy, his name was Turner Gill. He was a quarterback for Nebraska. And you can imagine, and he was from the same neighborhood, lived a block from my grandmother, and we got to watch him on WFAA Channel 8 every Saturday. Whoa, Nelly, Keith Jackson. It was awesome to be able to watch him. But in our neighborhood, we didn't have cable. Like Mr. Wahlberg was saying, you may not have the same access. In our neighborhood, cable was not available in the black neighborhood in Fort Worth of Como. And we would not have been able to watch him, but we were able to watch him and Keith Jackson on Saturday mornings. So I wanted to ask, with the loss of the ACP benefit, how is this going to affect the current media marketplace? What would happen to the business plans of media service if we were to see a lapse in ACP funding in rural areas like Mr. Wahlberg we're talking about, and low-income areas and places like Fort Worth, Texas, where I'm from, if we lose this funding? Mr. Bergmayer was hoping that maybe you could touch on that to let us know what's going to happen if we lose this funding.
Yeah, the ACP is currently funding about 22 million Americans and helping them connect to broadband. As we all know, you need broadband to watch online video. You need fast, you need a very high quality connection. And I certainly would worry if many people are having to lose their internet connection or maybe even cut back to a lower tier that might not be as well suited for online video. That certainly could reduce the potential audience for sports or other video content online and really harm online video businesses of all kinds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wanted to talk also too about the over-the-air local sports offering. Obviously, this is huge. We talked about that. This is how people in my area watch the Dallas Cowboys, for instance. And Mr. Lawlor, I was hoping you could talk more about the important role of local broadcasters and how Scripps partnerships with leagues and teams creates a consumer-friendly lane for sports fans?
Well, thank you for the question. I agree. I think, we believe that fans deserve to be able to see their favorite teams. And when that happens, little kids get to, fall in love with players and dream about aspiring to be athletes themselves. We're very fortunate to have 62 local stations. We're in 40 different markets, and in many of those markets, we have second stations. And we see those as an opportunity for us to be able to acquire over-the-air broadcast rights. As we said earlier, there seems to be a real challenge to the regional sports network business right now, and we see an opportunity for broadcasters, not just ourselves, but there are others, Gray, Nexstar, Tegna, Sinclair, that are currently negotiating for and have acquired over-the-air broadcast rights for games. And we believe the opportunity to make these games not behind a streaming paywall, but free, over-the-air, visible on cable, on satellite, and with just an antenna, even where broadband may be a challenge. The ability to put these games in front of fans is critical for leagues and teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last question. It seems like as far as non-sports entertainment that there's a lot more diversity as far as, weekly programming and things like that. But when it comes to sports, how is it going to affect diversity in things like sports broadcasting and those on-the-field opportunities?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this year for the first time with our rights with the WNBA, we're going to be launching a live studio show. Friday night, 7 to 7:30, the entire country will be able to see that, and we'll have a wraparound show in between our two national games. We're going to do the same thing for the NWSL, the Women's Soccer League, a live national studio show showcasing players, telling stories, introducing fans to the players. I think for us, that's our first big step. We will continue to look for shoulder programming and other programming that can complement that really expands the diversity. But showcasing these sports that typically have been very hard to find, I think is the first step.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired.
The gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Mr. Ourand, different sports leagues have different models for how viewers can watch them, largely due to the differences in what teams own certain media rights. For example, the NFL owns all of its media rights. If I'm stand corrected, you can tell me. Whereas the Major League Baseball owns the media rights for only some of its teams. Can you talk about how this affects the sports media marketplace? What impact does it have on the media coverage for different leagues? This is for Mr. Ourand.
Sure, thank you very much. The NFL owns the media rights, and it's a national media rights. And
Yeah.
right now, it makes all of the games available nationally. Some games are within regional windows, so you're not, unless you were to subscribe to YouTube and get a NFL Red Zone, you get whatever games come on your local markets. I think with the NBA, with the NHL, and with Major League Baseball, they also have national deals like that, but they allow the teams, the individual teams, to sell their local rights, and that is where over the past several decades, the regional sports network business really was able to grow because you're able to watch it over regional sports networks. Now, because of cord cutting, the cord cutting means that the regional sports networks are getting less money, and the rights fees kept going up, and so all of a sudden the business wasn't as good for the regional sports networks, and now they're looking at other areas to go, and that's where Mr. Lawlor's company comes in. That's where a lot of the streaming companies come in, and they're trying to figure out how to move forward while still making money off those local rights.
Okay, let me ask you that. You mentioned NFL, and I know in the opening statements we had a healthcare hearing down here, so I missed most of the hearing. But you mentioned the NFL, in Peacock streaming that playoff game. Do you anticipate that being, and anybody can chime in if they want, do you anticipate that being a regular occurrence? I mean, NBC is Peacock as well, but, you know, people just don't know yet. And I know you want to give them choices and everything's good. You can see more games and what have you, different sports. But that was a real problem in, you know, my constituents were very upset about not being able to get that game if they didn't have Peacock. Do you anticipate that happening over and over?
Yes, I anticipate that happening a lot. That's part of the NFL's plan. It's part of the network's plan. I think you're going to see almost certainly a wild card game exclusively on Paramount Plus next season, possibly on Amazon as well. It's not for the foreseeable future, but certainly for the next couple of years.
So you think even the regular season games are going to be strictly on Peacock, for example? I know that Paramount Plus is a Thursday night game, so people are used to get Paramount Plus, but the Peacock, they weren't. I mean, I think they were thrown off guard.
No, the Peacock, the NBC is going to keep their regular Sunday night football game on NBC. You can also access it through Peacock.
And that's good that you have the choice to access it through Peacock as well. Okay, Mr. Ourand, as more and more competitors enter the streaming space and content bifurcates among these platforms, consumers are finding themselves having to purchase additional subscriptions to get the shows they want. Consumers may get sticker shock if everything on streaming is paid by subscription. Isn't there still a space for an advertisement-based model? And can't we rely on consumers to make decisions for themselves if they want to receive more or less ads, if it saves them money in the long run? If you could comment on that, I appreciate it. I know we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. I think that what we're seeing with regard to that is streaming is where a lot of these leagues feel like they can make some money that is going to be that's a lot more tighter because of the advertising market. The advertising market and the pay TV market is suffering through so much cord cutting that they're getting much less fees from cable and satellite operators than they used to, and that's a big problem that the leagues are facing right now.
All right, in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back and submit my third question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 29th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lara and Ranking Member Matsui, for holding this important hearing. And I appreciate having our witnesses here who are here to give us their expertise and their opinions on this topic. I'm glad that we're having this discussion with the Super Bowl and March Madness right around the corner. It's an exciting time of the year for people who are sports fans. Professional and collegiate athletics generate billions of dollars in revenue, which is a testament to the intense popularity of the product. In all cases with televised athletics, the talent and skill of athletes are the driving force behind this revenue. I think it's important that when we have these conversations, we talk about the role that athletes occupy in the media ecosystem. Mr. Ourand, does the increasing annual revenues that professional sports leagues see through media rights deals translate to higher salaries for the players?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And college athletics also brings in a lot of money. For example, they brought in $16.6 billion in the 2021-2022 school year here in the United States. However, unlike professional athletes, college athletes are not paid a salary. Mr. Ourand, when college athletic conferences and the NCAA bring in massive media rights deals without player pay being a factor, do we see similar increases in salaries and bonuses for coaches, athletic directors, and executives? And how is the money that these deals bring in distributed? How is it distributed?
Yes, of course, you see coaches get paid more if you get more rights. That's why you see a lot of the best deals, the coaches' deals come from the SEC or come from the Big Ten. I think what a college administrator would say is that a lot of what they do with the money that comes in helps to fund non-revenue sports or a lot of the sports that don't bring in that revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they overemphasize the word "a lot" of the money goes there. Thank you. Do you think that we can expect college sports media revenue to continue to rise?
I would expect so.
Yeah, it has risen, and there seems to be no glitch. It probably will continue.
The one thing about college sports right now is that the SEC has a deal with ESPN that goes into the 2030s. So does the ACC. The Big Ten deal with goes into the late 2020s. So it's going to rise, but it's going to be a while before these deals are up to where they could see a significant increase.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. These coaches and executives are well paid. In 2021 at the NCAA, we saw compensation for their top 3 executives at the NCAA as high as $3.5 million, $3.2 million, and $1.4 million per year. And none of them are ever at the risk of being taken off on a stretcher when it comes to a game being had, et cetera. Yet they're compensated very, very handsomely. Turning now to streaming, it's been proven to be a space where diverse audiences have a lot of access to the content they've wanted. That includes more diverse streamers, creative teams, and diversity on the screen. For folks in my district and many Latino households across the country, it means accessing Spanish language versions of popular American sports, and it means more options for accessing internationally popular sports like soccer. Mr. Thun, as a company that operates both a traditional pay TV satellite service and streaming, do you have an opinion on whether importing regulations from 40 years ago, before the internet, as we know it, existed, would affect streaming services and consumers?
If you're talking about applying retransmission consent to vMVPDs, that's a place that we don't think is applicable. And frankly, I think we have problems as it is with retransmission consent. So I wouldn't want to take a broken model and apply it to a brand new business set because I think it would be damaging. We would love to try to figure out ways to make retransmission consent more balanced between the distributors and the broadcasters so that we don't have the fights that we have. But unfortunately, that's not the state of play.
Mm-hmm. So the fights that you have, it's based on legal interpretations, it's based on revenue, it's based on the convolution of people just trying to exist in this ecosystem and run an honest business, correct?
No, it's all about money. The fights between us and the broadcasters and vice versa is always about what's the rate that we should pay and apply to our customers.
But in order to run an honest business in an ecosystem, you have to understand the rules, interpret the rules, et cetera, and that maybe that's where the convolution happens is people are saying, no, that's not how we interpret it. We're allowed to do this. And the others say, no, you're not allowed to do that. Isn't that what's going on when we don't clarify or update our rules and laws and regulations?
We would love to see them updated and clarified. I think hopefully we're all acting, honestly and within the rules of the laws as they're written today. I think the biggest problem, though, is how do we set equal footing between the broadcasters and the distributors in any new legislation around that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your generosity. My time has expired. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes a gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Congressman Carter for swapping questioning spots with me. We're all trying to navigate the crazy hearing schedule today, and I appreciate the ability to ask the questions. I wanted to talk a little bit about the AFC wildcard game and the streaming on Peacock. I was one of the millions of Americans who struggled with how to watch that game. And I found the experience frustrating, but not for the reasons that have been mentioned so far. I mean, it's true. When I first tried to tune in the game, I didn't know where it was, but 5 seconds on Google cleared up that mystery. There's been some testimony that it's difficult to figure out how to download the Peacock app and get everything hooked up. But I think American consumers have become accustomed to that just because you have to have so many apps to be able to get access to the content that you want to see. It's true that I had to pay for it, but what I did was subscribe to Peacock and then immediately unsubscribe. Sorry, Peacock. So essentially, I turned it into pay-per-view. I paid $5.99 to see the game, and that seemed to me like a reasonable entertainment value proposition. When you rent a movie online, it costs $5 or $10, so $6 for 3 hours worth of content didn't seem unreasonable. But I'll tell you what really did bother me is, so I turned on the game. After the first change of possession, an advertisement came on, and Geico said, this game brought to you by Geico. And I thought, that's not true. This game was brought to me by me. right? Because I just paid $6 for it. So it seems to me like we're in this kind of confusing area where the industry is trying to sort out how to pay for this content. And I have faith that we're going to get there because markets, free markets, seem to find a way, and consumer demand is going to drive consumer behavior, and consumer behavior is going to influence the way that we provide that content to them. So, Mr. Bergmayer, could you talk a little bit about whether or not you share my sense of frustration about that, and how you think this is all going to sort out?
Yeah, I mean, the specific comment about how people subscribe to services that increasingly also have ads, that certainly is a source of common consumer complaints. And I think what you mentioned about the convenience of games, I agree it is a free market. I think the issue sometimes that I see with sports is the short-term gain versus the long-term building up of a fan base, meeting fans where they are. And my worry here is that in a free market, sometimes the companies are incentivized to have very short-term deals that seem to make sense right away, but are alienating the fan base or perhaps not growing the fan base to a new generation of viewers. So I agree that the free market eventually works things out. It takes some time, and lots of companies make some pretty significant mistakes along the way.
Thank you. Mr. Ourand, really appreciated your testimony, and thank you very much for not reading. I don't like it when we just read at each other, right? I think it takes away the human interaction of a hearing like this, and so when people read their opening statements, then we read our questions, I think it really, detracts from it, so I appreciated that. You mentioned in your testimony that sometimes when you're walking your dog, you're noticing that people are not watching your game, and that means that your neighbors are subsidizing your viewing of the game. And I found that really fascinating because it illustrates kind of the tragedy of the commons that has occurred with these subscription services. What's wrong with the idea that if I want to watch my favorite team, I can go straight to the team and ask to watch the game? Why are teams not just going to eventually cut out the middleman and market their content straight to consumers?
I think for a couple of reasons. One comes down to money. Regional sports networks historically have paid a lot of money for the rights to those games. And so if you're a regional sports network or any sports network, if you're a team, do you just kind of want to sit down and collect the money, or do you want to try to create your own media business? And sometimes it's easier just to sit down and collect money.
Right. I mean, I understand that, but I think ultimately, like any business, sports teams are not in the business of doing deals with regional sports networks. They're in the business of establishing relationships with their fans and building those relationships over time. Everyone in business is in that same boat. And it seems to me like that opportunity to have a direct relationship with the people that you're serving is one that eventually they're not going to be able to pass up. So, I mean, I, as a sports fan, have no problem with the idea that I'm going to have to pay a few dollars to stream a game online.
But I will say that there's there's an unmistakable trend towards streaming in what you're describing. That's certainly the trend line.
Right.
But if I may jump in, those are actually available largely with a direct-to-consumer subscription and on a regional sports network. So the opportunity for a subscriber to not be a part of pay TV and get to those games is available in a large quantity of teams in the marketplace.
Right.
But to answer your question, why? Because they wouldn't make the money that they make through the distribution that we provide and the subsidization that, in John's example to you, because we pay for everybody who has that level of subscription. We pay a license fee for every single one of those subscribers for us in our choice package.
Right.
So if they were to do one-offs and direct, subscriptions, it pales in comparison to what the model that they currently enjoy through us.
It will certainly be interesting to see how the market sorts out. Thank you for your testimony. I see I'm out of time. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Representative. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Representative Kelly for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Matsui for holding this morning's hearings, and thank you to the witnesses for providing testimony. I'm glad the subcommittee is following up on the September 2023 video marketplace hearing, where we focused on how the video marketplace has changed and the resulting impact it has on consumer choice. As I said back in September, consumers deserve to have a choice, and I still believe that's true today. Competition in the video marketplace helps ensure consumer continue to have access to various video platforms, and the competition also drives innovation, which benefits consumers across the board. Mr. Bergmayer, can you talk about some of the ways that streaming services are bringing competition and innovation to consumers regarding sports programming?
I think one pretty obvious way is that people can just watch them on the device that they already have in their pocket. You're not limited to the home. You can watch in a much more convenient way. We've discussed the different options and, of course, the drawbacks of them, but there's a lot of benefits to distribution online, too. They're much less constrained by the technology. Online sports can experiment with lots of ways of presenting sports that are just not even possible on more traditional pay TV services, switching between camera angles and things. So I ultimately, we're here talking about some of the drawbacks of online video and online sports, but ultimately I am optimistic because I do think that the introduction of competition from online video, even though it is, I agree, very chaotic right now, I believe that the additional competition is ultimately good for consumers.
Thank you. Streaming is now the most widely watched form of video in America. Streaming has ushered in many new diverse offerings, including Afroland TV, American New Network, BET Plus, For Us, By Us Network, Telemundo, Televisa, Univision, and many more. This phenomenon has continued for sports programming, with the Allen Media Group securing a broadcast right from the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Conference and to distribute HBCU sports on a host of platforms, including new streaming services, HBCU Go. Mr. Bergmayer, how has the emergence of streaming led to a more diverse offering?
Yeah, I think, again, getting past the cable or the satellite gatekeeper, getting into that small available window of programming, online video just in general and the internet in general has really broken down barriers, I think, for diverse creators. At the same time, though, I wouldn't say that it's just enough that diverse creators can start their own website or they can go on YouTube. We need to make sure that there's diverse content available and the platforms that people actually watch and subscribe to, the major streaming platforms. Frankly, some of them do a good job, some of them do a poor job. There's a lack of data on this, a lack of independent data, rather. But I do think it's opened up a lot of opportunities, but it's not like we can just say, okay, we're done now.
Okay, let's look at women's sports access to streaming now. These days, streaming offers choices far beyond the traditional male, which we're used to, sports leagues, and includes women's professional sports. Women's professional sports leagues have long struggled to find distribution through traditional broadcast and cable. Mr. Lawlor, can you talk about how Scripps' partnership with CBS, ESPN, and Amazon has changed the game for National Women's Soccer League?
Yes, thank you. We're really proud to be part of this new distribution deal, historic deal, richest deal in U.S. women's sports history. I think it very much models what the future of sports rights may look like. It's not a singular asset, but it's, to your point, I think you said consumers deserve to have a choice. And I think this combination of four media companies is a perfect choice. You have Scripps that's going to provide 50 games for the NWSL over the air, free, on ION into every single market. You have Amazon that'll provide 25 games on a streaming service. You'll have ESPN and ABC providing some games, either on cable or broadcast. And of course, CBS will have the playoffs and the championship game. So I think it's a really compliment, and I think it speaks to what you said. The consumers do have a choice, and here's the opportunity for us to make available the NWSL, which typically has been very difficult to find. Now you'll have, almost 100 games over the course of the season, live over the air, full broadcast, and I think streaming is a complement to that.
Thank you so much, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. I now yield myself 5 minutes for my questioning. I want to personally thank Chair Latta and Ranking Member Matsui for putting together this hearing on sports media rights. I appreciate the time of all the witnesses present here today. Sports, to my constituents in Pennsylvania's 13th Congressional District, they're essential entertainment, whether it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Philadelphia Eagles, or even, dare I say, the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone enjoys being able to access their favorite games. The evolution of the media marketplace has allowed for the most diverse range of options to view sports that we've ever had before. Local broadcasting allows even my most rural constituents with lack of internet access to watch their favorite teams in market. Meanwhile, Streaming allows to view some of our most local sports teams, including our own Altoona Curve, which was impossible traditionally to watch 10 to 15 years ago. My first question is for you, Mr. Ourand. Of the major professional and college sports, which do you believe is most accessible to their fans?
I think clearly the NFL is most accessible. All of their games are available on over-the-air broadcast television.
And specifically, which sport do you feel it's football, professional football, has the greatest accessibility for free over-the-air live games?
Again, the NFL, I think, does a fantastic job with that.
My next question is for you, Mr. Lawlor, and you, Mr. Thun. Leagues are putting more games on streaming platforms. How does this affect your businesses, and do you see this continued trend to arise?
Yes, I definitely see the trend continuing to arise, and it's clearly concerning. For a long time, I've thought the strongest part of the network affiliate model is the live sports. Over the last number of years, much of the entertainment programming has, now navigated and shifted over to the direct-to-consumer platforms. But live sports has really been the foundation, and it's a great economic benefit for our local TV stations. We own 18 ABC stations, 11 NBC stations, so clearly live sports is really important to us. When the NFL put a playoff game behind a streaming platform, that was clearly alarming. We own the NBC station in West Palm Beach. So while the NFL granted Peacock the right and the mandate that they had to put that NFL game in Miami for their local fans, West Palm Beach, that local fan base is Miami. Is the Dolphins. 20 miles from West Palm Beach is Hard Rock Stadium. And so yet they were not able to run the game in West Palm Beach, only in Miami. And so I think, that's really the challenge. We're very much concerned that, the economics and the revenue we bring in from sports also helps fund our local news operation. And most local news operations are not profitable by themselves. We need sports and other assets to be able to generate the revenue that allows us to fund that. So we're definitely concerned about this being the beginning of a trend.
Mr. Thun, how would you add to that?
I echo a lot of the same comments. It's a friction point for our customers when last year that same wildcard game was available on broadcast to our customers, yet this year it got cherry-picked, given to Peacock, and then created problems for customers who weren't aware where it was and then had to subscribe to get it. And not everyone is technically facile to get those subscriptions lined up. So there were people probably, like my mother, if she was interested in the game, would have trouble getting that Peacock account lined up and put on her television. Not everyone has smart televisions either. So there's limitations to it. I don't think we're going to see the end of it. It's just the starting point, which is unfortunate. But it's incumbent upon us to try to find ways to bring those experiences back into our own experiences, whether it's a super aggregation play where we can have the base subscription with our pay TV services coupled with the ability to access Peacock, which we have those capabilities, the ability to access something like Paramount Plus or others, then customers can still get those games within those experiences, but it still requires a subscription that chief among pain points with our customers is cost.
Mr. Ourand, recently we have seen a lot of news about regional support networks, RSNs, and how that model is in trouble. As we look toward the future of RSNs, do you anticipate more teams, such as the Pittsburgh Penguins, moving toward broadcast model for RSNs, or teams or leagues buying back their rights? What's better for the consumer?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure what's better for the consumer, but I can tell you are going to see a trend of teams looking to sell their rights to local broadcast stations. You're also going to see a trend of teams looking to sell their rights to a streaming company. And I think ultimately what you're going to see locally is going to be non-exclusive. So if you're a pay TV subscriber, you'll be able to watch it on an RSN or a broadcast channel. And if you're not, you're going to be able to pay for it via a streaming service.
I thank all of the witnesses for your comments. And now I yield 5 minutes for his questioning, Representative Soto from Florida.
Thank you so much, Chairman. This weekend, we're excited to host the NFL Pro Bowl in Orlando, back in my hometown. And I've just been amazed about how dominant the NFL has become. Staggeringly 93 of the top 100 broadcasts were NFL games in 2023. When I read that stat, I watch a lot of football, so I'm not that surprised, but apparently everybody is. Bucks, Jags, and Dolphin games are all available in Central Florida at various times, and obviously a lot of people are watching those playoff games too. So it's clear these are so valuable to both broadcasts and streaming. Now we see the NFL bid out streaming for what ultimately became the Dolphins-Chiefs playoff game. We saw my colleague Pat Ryan request a GAO study on that, and we heard a lot on those issues. Amazon is now in the mix with the NFL. Major League Soccer, including our Orlando City Lions, is now in Apple. WWE, which we film in Orlando, is going to Netflix. And then Bally Sun Sports, if it wasn't complicated enough, is now in bankruptcy, and Amazon may be helping to air Orlando Magic games, Tampa Bay Rays games, and Tampa Bay Lightning games. So I just want to voice a few fundamental truths that we see in Central Florida. We Americans love our sports, right? And more of it's moving to streaming. And so we first need to ensure internet access through the Affordable Connectivity Program. I know Mr. Bergmayer mentioned over 22 million people are getting through that program. And to protect consumers as we transition to more streaming. But I'm thinking, like, where's the careful balance in all this? Local broadcasters, local content are priorities for us in Central Florida. We're the 20th largest media market, and people want their local news. People want to highlight Central Florida. And in Orlando, we watch both Orlando and Tampa Bay sports. At a minimum, professional sports are a critical part of that local content and a key revenue generator. So I'm wondering if limited dual programming requirements for both streaming and for national access, but local access for local teams, whether that should be the careful balance that we intervene to protect, especially with seniors, struggling families, young people in local markets wanting to see this. Mr. Ourand and then Mr. Bergmayer, it'd be great to hear, is this the careful balance that we need to strike, or do you have other ideas that you can give us for today? We'll start with Mr. Ourand.
I think right now, every single one of the leagues identifies what you described as a problem. There are so many choices that are out there. I think the problem is that there's the migration to streaming that is happening, but there are so many different streaming services, and within the business, they call it a rebundling. And at some point, there's going to be a bundling of streaming services that's going to look a lot like Mr. Thun's DirecTV and what he provides, sort of coming back that way. So it's something that's known at the league level, and it's something that they're trying to figure out as they do their deals.
Mr. Bergmayer, briefly, since my time's limited.
I believe that local access certainly is good for fans, and in some instances, as I've said, hinging taxpayer support of teams absolutely should be conditioned on their making games available. And I would just say, broadcasters have public interest obligations, and streamers do not. And among those do include emergency alert information that they provide, local content, figuring out how to ensure that those important values are fulfilled as the business model shift, I think, is a very important challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Lawlor, how critical is local access to local professional sports to the financial viability and viewership of local broadcasts? And also, how do we define local? Is it regional? You mentioned before with Palm Beach. Is it regional? Is it the whole state? Should it be multi-state? It'd be great to hear your responses to those two questions.
Yes, thanks for the question. Local, obviously, we're a local broadcast company. We acquire the rights to broadcast in specific markets that's defined by the FCC. Professional sports teams have the right to distribute their product and their games in certain regions, so there's not overlap. You get into a place like, Fort Myers, where you have the Heat coming up and the Orlando Magic coming down, and trying to define that for the teams is important. But I think local access is really important. And the ability to incorporate, doesn't have to be exclusive to Mr. Thun's point, but to incorporate local broadcast to be able to, especially in a state like Florida, where you have some older residents, the ability to put games over the air, broadcast free to all viewers. And then if there's, a complement with streaming that engages a new consumer or somebody who uses a different device, I think it's the perfect complement.
Well, I can tell you Floridians want to see Florida teams regardless of the regions in our state, and that's going to be a big part of protecting local access. And I yield back.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Dunn from Florida.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sports broadcasting is at a revolutionary stage, and as streaming becomes more and more popular, I have concerns over consumers becoming fatigued, confused, and frankly, taken advantage of by the many options presented. Today, I'm particularly concerned with the impact on the ever-changing landscape it's going to have on college athletics and their media rights. A large driver in revenue for college athletic departments comes from sports broadcasting. The two most important sports are college football and basketball. Other university sports programs that don't drive top viewership dollars often rely on the revenues generated by the more viewed teams to help fund their programs. These programs stand to be harmed if the income from the major revenue-generating sports is reduced. Many schools have found themselves locked into sliding grants of rights deals with their conferences that don't always work out best for the member schools. According to TV data, just 18 teams in college football account for 50% of all viewership, and many of those teams are actually locked into media contracts in their conferences, which contribute to conference realignments that we've seen so much about in college football. Mr. Ourand, thank you for being here today. In your testimony, you mentioned the Conference of Champions Pac-12's implosion. Can you summarize how media rights negotiations are unique in the college sports world and how these negotiations actually ultimately shape the makeup of the conferences?
What's unique about college is that when networks negotiate for media rights with the NFL or MLB or NHL, those are national media rights. But the networks then have to go to the SEC and negotiate based on the southeastern part of the United States, and the Big Ten for the northern part of it's very much bifurcated in the market right now, and so it makes each conference have to negotiate different deals with different networks, and there's not one central area where people can negotiate for that.
But it also seems like the conferences drive it rather than the schools, and sometimes that can be harmful to the schools, especially in a long-term contract. Is that fair?
Well, the conferences certainly do drive it, yes.
All right. So, Mr. Lawlor, thank you for being here. You mentioned in your testimony that Scripps has deals with professional as well as collegiate teams. Can you elaborate how those negotiations are actually rather different from each other?
Yeah, they're very different. Most of the significant conferences, have big deals with, the major networks, and those are long-term networks. And as you just said, there's a friction. You talk exclusively about revenue. I would tell you, while the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, that is all about revenue. For many other conferences, it's about visibility. And so we are partners with the Big Sky Conference. Part of our footprint for Scripps is heavily we're in 5 markets in Montana, we're in 2 markets in Idaho, we're in northern Arizona and California. And the visibility for the Big Sky Conference to put those games broadcast over the air, if it was not for us, those games would all be exclusively distributed on ESPN+. And when you look at a state like Montana, there is no professional sports in Montana. The Montana State football game is their Super Bowl. It's the biggest game of their year. It happens Saturday before Thanksgiving. In our 5 markets in Montana, the lowest rating last year for that game was a 30 household. That means that 30% of all the TVs in Bozeman, Montana were turned on at that time to watch that game live. And it went up to almost 40 rating in other markets. So while we're focused on the biggest, the revenue associated with the biggest conference, I would tell you that broadcasters can also provide a great opportunity to showcase athletes, maybe not at the highest level, but are really important in states like Montana and other places where, they're not associated with the super conferences.
Well, I'm going to thank you for pointing that out. That was going to be my next question, to focus on the fact that you can help both the small schools and, frankly, the larger ones by giving them other teams to play against. And I'm hopeful we can continue this conversation to ensure that the consumers have effective options that don't overcomplicate the sports media marketplace. I struggle myself sometimes to find my game. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your attention on this. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Next is the gentle lady from the other great state. Congratulations from a Buckeye to a Michigan, which is hard to do, but Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, we have our ups, we have our downs. I want to thank everybody for having this hearing and to all the witnesses for testifying today. And before I begin, I want to emphasize the importance of sports for all families across the country. I'm a professional Detroit Lions player. I have desperately sought to find their games in years past. I'm still in mourning from last Sunday. I know the ups and the downs, and people have a hard time finding the stations. And I'm a Piston fan. I try to find the games, and I know how hard it is. I'm a hands-on professional and collegiate. And sports are the lifeblood of many of our communities, and they bring people together. That's what you're all talking about. But the sports media landscape has changed so much over the last decade, both national and local, professional and collegiate. The increased influence of online streaming platforms has impacted the media marketplace. That's just pure and simple. Streaming services have broadened the spectrum of choices available to consumers, reshaping the way people access, engage, and experience sports, as you've been talking about. But here's another reality. We know well that too many families still do not have the broadband connection that they need that's required to access all this new online content. Many still rely on traditional platforms like broadcasting and cable to access their beloved sports teams. And unfortunately, too many can't view their team's games without new and pricey subscriptions, if they can find them. I'm an expert at trying to figure out where games are being played or how to watch them. Today, I'm hopeful we can discuss where we can go from here to better understand and address how these changes have impacted the consumer experience. Mr. Bergmayer, can you discuss how the rise of cord cutting has influenced traditional subscriptions, broadcasting, cable, and any impacts that this trend could have generally that may be less obvious?
Yeah, I think one of them is the kinds of content that people access through local broadcasters, that there's not a clear model online. I mean, broadcasters obviously are local. They're inherently local. They serve a community. They have a tower. The signal reaches an area. And that's simply not the way that the internet works. And, it's very challenging to think how to ensure that if more and more people, if that's how they're watching their content online, I don't really have specific solutions. I do think that noting that it's an issue, and then some other things that are maybe still challenging, but maybe less so than localism. Just issues like accessibility and emergency alerts just really need to be attended to. When there's disasters or just like information about their local community, there just needs to be a way to reach people where they already are.
Thank you. Mr. Ourand, I'm going to ask you guys to be short because I've got a lot of questions. As a follow-up, how have streaming services impacted the viewership of collegiate sports specifically? And have you seen any impact on non-revenue generating and women's sports?
The streaming services generally have fewer viewers than traditional TV, and I haven't seen any impact on the non-revenue sports at all, no.
Or women's?
Or women's, no.
Okay. Mr. Lawlor, how have local network affiliate station owners like Scripps stepped up to ensure that local communities have access to local team games? You talked about it a little. How do you see this model benefiting all communities?
Well, I think as the change with regional sports networks and rights become available, again, I think the biggest challenge facing teams and leagues right now is reach. Whereas the regional sports networks 10 years ago reached 80% of all the households in the market, today it's down to 40 or even less. And I think that is why broadcasters are in a position to help solve the biggest problem. Teams and leagues want their fans to be able to see their games. And, in a market like Detroit, we we broadcast games like Oakland University basketball for increased visibility. In other markets.
And I watch it.
Thank you. In other markets, we've been successful in acquiring professional rights, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Arizona Coyotes, and I think there'll be more opportunities for that. But as we meet with league leaders and with team owners, consistently what we're hearing is because of cord cutting and fragmentation, they have a reach problem, and half to two-thirds of their fans can't see their games, and that is creating impact on long-term fandom, merchandise sales, ticket sales, and they're looking to solve for that. And local broadcasters can solve that.
Mr. Bergmayer, in the 12 seconds I have left, would investing in permanent affordable broadband solutions help?
Yes, very much so.
Thank you again for all you being here today. I'm one of the biggest cheerleaders in this committee for sports of all kinds. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back. And I lose a lot of bets.
Thank you, Mr. Stango. Next up is Mr. Allen from Georgia.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank all of you for being with us today. This is an important topic. I'm from the SEC, and you know, football is a religion down south. So, and I get a lot of complaints, to be honest with you. Obviously, you got to follow the money. Money's driving all of these options. And so where are we leaving the consumer, the actual one who is paying for all this? And often they get left behind and they complain. And they complain to members of Congress to, you know, we got to fix everything. And the last thing you want is for Congress to fix your problem. Hopefully the free market will fix it. But obviously we've talked about the history of cable and you know, how people were pleased with that for a long time, and then you had, I don't know, almost 1,000 channels, and people are watching just a few, and you know, they're upset that sports channels are focusing more on creating sensationalism about some of our social challenges and creating drama. They're frustrated they're now having to pay an equivalent amount in subscriptions, which has been brought up to different streaming services to watch the same content they once paid for on cable, which was, like I said, a lot simpler. You know, I was out visiting some friends in Wyoming when ESPN dropped Charter, and so had to go to a streaming service to get the Alabama football game. And I was the only one able to do that, which I learned from my children. But in this, you know, again, I believe in free market, but it needs to be real competition if streaming services you're going to have these exclusive access to content. And of course, football is the biggest example in my district. Mr. Lawlor and Mr. Thun, Big Tech is playing a major role in sports media, and they are the exclusive home to certain sports and games, which we've discussed over and over. Are you concerned with where Big Tech is going? I mean, this thing is moving at the speed of light, and now you got AI and all these other things coming in. Are we going to be able to keep up? I mean, how is this going to affect your business model?
It's going to have a big effect because the participants in pay TV today have company valuations with Bs. The folks that you're referring to have valuations with Ts behind their market cap. So they have a lot more disposable money to play in this space, and as sports rights become more and more expensive, and as pay TV wanes and subscriptions go down because the prices are already too high, you're inviting big tech to come in, to swoop in and buy those rights, and the leagues are pretty agnostic. They just want to know who's going to write the check.
Right.
And as long as somebody can write that big check, they'll happily take it.
But then the consumer, there's no evaluation of the consumer and their ability, who is paying the bill, and it is nothing about you know, their rights or their satisfaction. It seems upside down to me.
And that's part of the free market in this
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
Right.
if you're a sports fan, the good news is television still provides the most robust experience of any other kind to watch sports. The frustrating part is that more and more content is falling out of the bucket, the leaky bucket, as I call it. And it's being picked up by other companies, and it's creating a fragmented experience for customers. And I don't know how we were going to stop that.
Yeah. Mr. Lawlor, you?
Well, first of all, I would agree with Mr. Thun that pay TV is still the best experience for sports fans and offers the best options. I do look at big tech as a very concerning competitor. As Mr. Thun said, their pockets are deep. But I think I look at what's right for fans and what's right for teams and local communities. And I think the MLS exclusive deal with Apple, where it wasn't just league level games, it was even the local rights. All rights were brought together in the Apple deal. And I'm a FC Cincinnati season ticket fan, and if I don't have an Apple subscription and then a subscription to their MLS, I can't watch a single FC Cincinnati game. Yeah. And I think that's a real problem for fans, that for a 10-year contract, nobody will be able to actually stumble onto it, engage, and develop fan loyalty down the road. So I'm definitely concerned about that exclusivity and the impact on teams and fans.
Well, the other thing is, some of you are regulated and some of you are not.
Correct.
It's different rules. So with that, I yield back. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Next up is Ms. Clark.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank our ranking member, Matsui, for convening this hearing, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. The evolution of television from an industry of just a few broadcast networks delivering programming to consumers over the air to the multi-billion-dollar marketplace of today has been remarkable. The proliferation of cable and satellite providers, as well as online video distributors, have been powered by advancements in technology, changed consumer habits, and created more competition than was previously imaginable. This transition has not been without challenges, and sports programming has not been immune. In particular, the continued fragmentation of sports content across different streaming services and broadcast networks has created some turmoil for those who were not early adopters in the rise of streaming. Additionally, the challenges of this evolving sports media landscape have led to disputes between rights holders and distributors, resulting in content blackouts that can leave sports fans in the impacted community without any way to watch their favorite teams. These issues aside, the rise of streaming also present a number of consumer benefits and opportunities in sports programming and the industry more broadly. The increased competition provided by streaming platforms allows consumers to be more selective in only paying for the content they want, and the lack of contractual commitments gives consumers the flexibility they need to cycle on and off a service as their budget permits. Over-the-top video services also provided more diverse, independent content creators the platform to reach much greater audiences in new and innovative ways. Streaming has also provided a home for more niche sports, giving fans access to sporting events not carried by traditional networks. However, it is critical that we note the fundamental building block for all of these developments: reliable, affordable broadband access. As we discuss the changes and innovations of the industry, we must be sure that sports media does not become another dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. Perhaps the greatest tool we have to combat the digital divide is the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides low-income households with a monthly benefit to help pay for broadband access. This program, which currently serves over 22 million American households, is expected to run out of funds as soon as April of this year. And it is critical that Congress act as soon as possible to provide additional funding. And that's why I've introduced the bipartisan bicameral ACP Extension Act, providing additional funding for this important program, and I urge all of my colleagues to co-sponsor this legislation. Mr. Bergmayer, can you speak to the importance of affordable, reliable internet access in creating a fair, pro-consumer sports media landscape? And others can feel free to chime in.
Yes, thank you first, Representative Clark, for your leadership on the Affordable Connectivity Program. I think it's a vital program, and it absolutely should be renewed. As you point out, you can't access sports media online without an internet connection. If the ACP were to run out, for example, and people lost their connection, that would harm them, as I said before, or if they had to downgrade their connection and the quality wasn't there. It's also worth noting that even if people, because the internet is so important, manage their budget to maintain their internet service, then they're going to have less money to spend on things that they may see as more optional, such as, for example, sports and entertainment programming online. So I believe that without fast, affordable broadband, without good Wi-Fi in the home, and any number of things, all this discussion about the move to streaming is for nothing, because people can't watch it unless they can first get on the internet.
Absolutely. Well, let me move on to my next question. It is important that we as policymakers not only seek to understand why certain models aren't working, but also look at the models that have found success in a challenging landscape, particularly those that have contributed to more diverse, well-rounded sports media environment. Scripps Sports entered the market at a time when other broadcasters were looking for exit ramps and have found success broadcasting games outside of the traditional Big Four professional sports leagues. Scripps' promotion of women's sports in particular has been notable. Mr. Lawlor, how does Scripps Sports' business model promote diverse sports programming? And what creative ways, beyond just showing a game, has the company been able to promote its sports rights to a wider audience? And what can you tell us about the size and the makeup of your sports watching audience?
Well, thank you for the question. Gotham FC and the New York Liberty deserve to be seen.
Absolutely.
Both championship level teams, both inspiring women, heroes among those teams, and they deserve to be seen. And that's why our company has stepped up, identifying that ION, a national over-the-air broadcast network that's visible in every household in America, is the perfect place to extend women's sports. We last year signed a deal with the WNBA. We had their exclusive rights on Friday nights. And this year we're part of the extension of the NWSL. In both cases, we've created franchise nights, exclusive Friday night doubleheader for the WNBA, and we're adding this year a live studio show before the first game. Look a lot like the NFL studio shows on a Sunday. We're doing the same thing for the NWSL. To your point, being able to bring sports that typically were diverse and tucked behind a paywall or hard to find and erratic, now to a consistent place where people can see it every week. They can develop a habit in watching, get to know all the players. We think is a tremendous opportunity, and we're really excited to tell those stories this
Thank
year.
you, Mr. Lawlor. I'm over time, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I yield myself 5 minutes. Thank you all for being here today. And I have, my first question is for all of you, and we'll start with Mr. Ourand, because I'm going to follow up with you after the fact, so that way we give you a little time to recuperate. And some of this pertains to what Dr. Joyce started going into, but I have a general question about the sports media marketplace for all the witnesses. We have discussed how specific sports games, such as when the Buckeyes, Ohio State, I know the Ohio State University, took on Purdue this past college football season, was exclusively on streaming platforms rather than being carried on their regular broadcast stations. Now, we talked about some of our elderly. My 86-year-old mother could not find the freaking football game, and she was losing it. So I would like to know how you think we got into this point. More consumers than ever are cutting the cord and consuming media exclusively through streaming services. Do you believe that is what happening in the sports media marketplace is simply the market adapting to consumer behavior, or is this simply something else? Mr. Ourand?
I believe we got into this point with something that has nothing to do with sports. I believe that entertainment programming and entertainment viewers already started migrating toward streaming services. And I think what we're seeing now and what we're dealing with now is the sports programmers and the sports leagues slowly trying to follow suit with that. So you're seeing a lot of like what Mr. Thun said called leakage, where you get a couple of games along those lines. I'm a Maryland Terrapin and I also have to watch Peacock for Big Ten, so I can feel where you're coming from.
You feel it then. Mr. Thun?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Ourand that it started with streamers of general entertainment and as a vehicle to differentiate their products and modernize against other customer demands, they started spelunking into sports rights. They're interested in it, as well as the leagues themselves, to diversify their potential buyers of the product. And so while still the lion's share of the content's sitting within pay TV, we're going to see dribs and drabs along the way to fall out of pay TV and into these streaming services, which will lead to more confusion and friction.
And I certainly agree. One would ask, though, why did entertainment viewers start the migration and cord cutting first? And I think it's just the high prices and poor quality of the MVPD package due to a lack of competition.
Thank you. Mr. Lawlor.
I would also echo the comments here. I mean, I think what's consistent is, in many cases, the rights holders for the sports are also the owners of these new direct-to-consumer platforms. And so as they renegotiate their rights, they have a benefit to build a new business by extending sports onto that. And so I think the interest of over-the-air broadcast or reaching the masses conflicts with their desire to also build a new revenue stream within the company.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Ourand, as I said, was coming back to you. You mentioned in your testimony that we are in a sort of a hybrid model right now with sports media rights, where there are streaming exclusive events, but some are still carried in their local markets. Do you think there is a future where a type of hybrid model can work here, or is it a market moving in one direction? Hit your microphone, please. Thank you.
I find it very, very hard to predict beyond a couple of years because nobody knows. I think for the next several years, you are going to see some sort of hybrid model. And I think it's one thing that the leagues really want to do, because one of the biggest complaints that I hear are about blackouts, especially for NBA games, NHL games, Major League Baseball games. And those blackouts are caused by regional sports networks. If they're spending that much money for the rights, then they want to make sure that they that they have their designated areas for that. Nobody else can encroach in on that. So the hybrid model potentially could solve that problem.
Would any other members like to add to that? You have 40 seconds. Mr. Lawlor.
Well, I agree. The hybrid model is something that we'll probably see, over the next couple of years. Blackouts are something that have had an effect with sports. Obviously, we're an over-the-air broadcast company. We have, we started some of the first TV stations in America. Our station in Cleveland is the first television station in Ohio. We've done probably tens of thousands of retrans deals over the years. We've had one blackout for 5 weeks ever. So I do think that sports rights are a priority. They're an important part of the package, but I think most, especially local broadcasters, get deals done. They get deals done without any fanfare, and that benefits consumers.
All right. Thank you all very much. Ms. Eshu, the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I was downstairs at another hearing, and I'm glad to join you. I think this is an important hearing, and thank you to the witnesses. I read all of your testimony last evening, and for sure, Americans love sports. I mean, we really love sports, and we love watching sports, and I'm one of the millions that do. Certainly the 49ers, the Warriors. I mean, we've got something going in the Bay Area. The entertainment industry, no question, is in the midst of a transformational period. Many customers are cutting the cord. They're transitioning to streaming. We've heard this from references not only from you as witnesses, but from members, and to direct-to-consumer programming. And millions continue to rely on cable subscriptions for their entertainment, and they pay a big price for that. It ain't cheap. Sports programming hasn't avoided the chaos that this has created, and asking tough questions of the sports leagues and their partners about how best to deliver content. I think our job here is to protect the American consumer, to ensure that they're able to easily access the content that they pay for. I mean, I just think it's a racket. It's a racket. It has to be such a form of embarrassment that customers pay and then don't get. I don't know, who can defend that on this panel? I mean, isn't someone, some outfit embarrassed by this?
I
Is
know
that,
we're
is that a great American business model? I don't think so. I mean, consumers are being hammered. It's completely unfair. And I would say bravo to the FCC and Chairwoman Rosenworcel and the commissioners for taking action, to at least provide consumers the avenue of a rebate when they're subjected to blackouts. And I've had bipartisan legislation with Congressman Scalise in the last two Congresses. It would reform the existing regime to prevent blackouts and allow free market contract negotiations to happen under traditional copyright law. But let's get to who wants to speak to this racket.
I'll take
Because,
it back.
and I'm really being hard and harsh, but really, that's the way I view it. That's the way I view it. I think it's an outrage, and I don't think we can sidestep that. I don't know how any outfit can become attractive to a consumer when the outfit hammers the very paying customer. I mean, my father always used to say, "My customers are always right." That was his business model. He was a jeweler and a watchmaker by trade. So who wants to speak to this?
I can take a crack at it,
Yeah,
if you don't
no,
mind.
good.
We're at this place because the prices of pay TV have gone up to an absurd degree. And you look at what's the biggest driver of cost increases, it's sports and broadcast. And sports kind of fuels the cost of broadcast. Broadcast television has gone up by 270%.
Well, let me ask this, because none of us have a lot of time. Do the broadcasters support this effort at the FCC?
Well, I'm not a policy expert. The one thing that I just mentioned is that our company is really committed to getting deals
No,
done.
but do you support that? It's a yes or no.
I haven't spent enough time working with
I'm not going to speak for anyone in general. I believe that the broadcast industry does not support the FCC's current retransmission consent
Why?
blackout refund.
Why?
Why don't they support it? I believe because they want to keep the money, and that's and I share your outrage on this. And it's hardly the only anti-consumer practice in the industry that the FCC is currently addressing. We've talked about how ETFs, early termination fees, and cable, the FCC is addressing as well.
Gentlemen?
To me?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, if there's mandates that rebates are provided to customers, you've handed even more leverage to broadcasters in already stilted negotiations.
Why?
Well, the numbers that I just shared with you, 270% since 2015, that wasn't by our design. We didn't want the prices to go up that high, but that's what's being imposed upon us. That's why there's so many blackouts. That's why so many people have left pay TV. The prices have gotten to an absurd level, and we fight like hell to keep them as low as possible.
Mr. Ourand?
I think the broadcasters would tell you that it's a market solution, and that they're getting paid exactly. They're investing in the programming, and they're getting compensated for that programming as well. I think that would be what the broadcasters would say.
Well, my time has been used, and I yield back. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next up is the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the witnesses. I'm over here. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to follow up on Mr. Allen's question because I'm from Tennessee. And Mr. Lawlor and Mr. Thun, this past college football season, my constituents narrowly escaped a southern catastrophe, and that was the Tennessee-Alabama game being blacked out. So, and it was all because of a dispute between Charter and Disney, who owns ESPN. We know that. But ultimately, cooler heads prevailed, and we got to watch the game, even though Alabama won, which I'm sorry about that. But the costly TV rights affiliated with live sports could cause this to happen again in the future, right before a kickoff. So is there anything we can do in Congress? Or should it be left to the free market for a solution?
Well, we suggested in the midst of a blackout, a potential avenue for us to explore with broadcasters where, since we fight every time in these contract renewals over price, let the broadcasters have the pricing in their hands. We'll serve the customers and let them charge and bill them directly for that. That way, there are no blackouts. The customers get to choose, they get to set the price, and away we go. Unfortunately, that is a model that the broadcasters haven't embraced because they want to bank on 100% carriage and payment by us, and that's what leads to this friction, unfortunately.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would just add again, you know, obviously the two companies referenced there, neither of which are local broadcasters, but, you know, blackouts in sports are not uncommon. There is a lot of leverage associated with that. I think some of the most significant blackouts exist between the regional sports networks and, you know, providers. As Mr. Thun mentioned, you know, Dish doesn't carry any of the regional sports nets, so if you're a Dish consumer in any market with professional sports, you can't get that regional sports network. I think of a market like Denver, where Altitude and Comcast have never reached an agreement. In the last 3 or 4 years, the Colorado Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets have won the World Championship, and yet their fans can't see the games. And so I do think local broadcasters, not that we've never had, and I mentioned our company's had one impasse in our history, but not that local broadcasters don't have impasses, but they do get deals done. And and it is a free market, and sometimes that's complicated, but at the end of the day, broadcasters get deals done, and it's the most visible distribution platform available, and I think that's good for sports.
Okay. Mr. Ourand, with the amount of services needed to see every live game, it's starting to seem as though it'd be cheaper to buy some sports on pay-per-view rather than adding another subscription, basically. Is there any movement toward pay-per-view for sports, and how would that be beneficial or harmful?
I'm not seeing really much of a movement toward pay-per-view for sports. I think the sports leagues would view that as very harmful because they're only getting paid by the people that watch the sports. And I think one of the reasons that the pay TV prices have gone up is that everybody pays for that sports, whether you the sports channel, whether you watch it or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another question, Mr. Thun, how much is the SEC network worth, basically, to DirecTV, and what would happen if the SEC chose to have an exclusive rights agreement with the streaming network?
It depends on where you are in the country. As a Georgia Bulldog, it's very important to me.
Oh.
As a Tennessee Vol, I assume it's pretty good dogs. I think it's probably important to you as well.
Hush up, buddy.
But it's an important part of our programming lineup. We would not like to see that go exclusively to another streamer because that's just another friction point for our customers who used to get that content as part of our subscription to go leave. Now, I don't think ESPN has intentions to do that, but you never know.
No.
And their deal runs, thankfully, into the 30s, so we have a little bit of time on our hands to enjoy the SEC while we have it.
Well, the best league out there as well. So with that, I'll yield back. Mr. Balder.
Big Ten. Next up is Mr. Pfluger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the witnesses being here. My script says, as a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan, and I quit rooting for them about 2 weeks ago. And the father of 3 daughters who love Taylor Swift. I have my daughter here, personal point of privilege. My middle daughter, Caroline, is in the room here. And so I'm not sure if she's a Kansas City fan or a Taylor Swift fan, but I'm sure that our ratings have been accelerated by something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. No, let's get to the question I want to ask. In West Texas, since I don't live in the metropolitan area in DFW, would folks in my district, Mr. Bergmayer, when it comes to Midland, Odessa, San Angelo, would they be able to watch the Dallas Cowboys or would they have multiple viewing options, for the Dallas Cowboys? Some of them are still fans, believe it or not. Love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, as we've discussed today, the NFL games, they're available on local broadcast. I think the problem is that the local broadcast markets, the DMAs, they don't really coincide necessarily with where fans are distributed. So I think in many cases there's going to be fans, whereas games are online and they're out of technically the local market of that team at a different place. Yes, I do think we're going to see more games that are available only on paid streaming services.
Yeah, I think, having those options is obviously important, especially on the broadcast option for areas like that, may not be exclusively in one region or the other. What are your thoughts on the industry trend just in general? I mean, do you think that this hybrid model is going to be, will it continue?
I think the hybrid model is what we have, and it's likely to continue because I do not believe that there's going to be just one way that people continue to watch video. I think we're going to see a lot of divides, different demographics. Some are more online, some on traditional MVPDs. So presumably, if the leagues want to actually reach viewers where they are, they're going to have to explore multiple avenues.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Many consumers will go to sports bars and watch programming on multi-screen, displays. What changes would businesses have to make to show a streaming exclusive game such as Kansas City Dolphins game to their customers in that case?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And that's a big piece of our business is our commercial establishments. And it's tricky because they're mousetrap in the bigger sports bars like Buffalo Wild Wings. They've already wired everything to come through a satellite-delivered solution. So in order to wire every single TV in a bigger establishment with a streaming product, one, you have to get incremental bandwidth. Two, you have to buy the equipment to make that happen. It's not a cheap investment that they have to make. And then once it's on, my understanding is the streaming itself isn't simultaneous like you have from a pay TV provider, where if you're in a bar and there's 10 TV sets with the Cowboys on, you'll see the same action at the exact same time. On a streaming service, there's latency individual to each box, so you will see sort of choppy game viewing through the same establishment because it's a different technology.
Fans don't like that?
Well, I know our customers don't like it because they like to get it directly from us. So the particular game you referenced, the Dolphins and the Chiefs, that was a big pain point. I said earlier in my testimony, 97% of our customers that were hotels, bars, or restaurants didn't have the ability to broadcast that game because of the technical problems and the investments they'd have to make.
Thank you very much. Quickly, I've got a constituent, Bryce Hoppel. He's the fastest 800-meter sprinter in the U.S. I'm very hopeful that he's going to make it to Paris once again in the Olympics and medal. We're 180 days out from the 2024 games. And I'm curious to hear, Mr. Ourand, your view on how streaming has factored into the Olympics. I know this has kind of been discussed on other sports that we haven't necessarily had access to, but how has streaming changed people's ability to view the Olympics and other sports like that? How can I view Mr. Hoppel if I'm not there in person this summer?
That's one of the really great stories about streaming and what streaming provides. That you can see any event on streaming via Peacock. You'll have to subscribe to Peacock to see the prelims and maybe some of the races. But traditionally before streaming, there was something that the networks called warehousing. Where ESPN would buy all these rights, but then nobody else would have them, and they wouldn't have enough space to put them on. Now with ESPN Plus, there's a space for them to put those rights. Same thing with Peacock and streaming. So that is actually one area where streaming's really should get a gold star.
Well, we're going to be rooting for Bryce Hoppel. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pfluger. Next up is Mr. Carter from Georgia.
From Georgia, go Dogs. Gentlemen, back in 2018, I had the opportunity to tour the Fox Sports headquarters, and I was able to see firsthand the hundreds of technological staff that are working hard to produce and broadcast sporting events, and so I have a healthy respect, and I understand that it is a mammoth undertaking, and so I appreciate that and understand that. But it was a great opportunity for me to see innovation and investment up close. no matter what day of the week it is, we all take for granted the fact that we get to turn on our TV and watch our favorite teams like the Georgia Bulldogs in high definition, and it really is something that that keeps me going. I know that. Mr. Ourand, let me start with you. Can you tell me the difference or how the college sports marketplace differs from the professional? How does it differ? Or does it?
It differs greatly, especially in terms of football, where you have different conferences. So Georgia is part of the SEC. Ohio State is part of the Big Ten, and they negotiate national deals based on their regional footprint. Professional sports with the NFL, with the NBA, and Major League Baseball, they negotiate just national deals. That's it. And then the individual team.
You think that's going to change as we see a consolidation of the conferences, though? I mean, we got Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC now.
I believe Stanford's in the Atlantic Coast Conference as well. Yeah. I would expect something to change. I have no knowledge that anything's going to change, but I think one of the areas of growth in the business of college sports is to centralize everything and actually go to the market with a really big package.
I suspect that's the case. Mr. Lawlor, Mr. Thun, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I think part of the conference realignment was about money, obviously. Because the Pac-12 failed to get a market-based television deal, and those colleges couldn't compete with the likes of the SECs or the Big Tens or even the Big 12s or the ACC. So they had to pack their bags and find new conferences, and some of them found their way into the Big Ten, and some found their way into the ACC. What that means for subscribers, though, interestingly, what it means to our checkbooks, is that these conference payments are predicated on the team territories and the states that those colleges occupy. So suddenly the ACC is going to get money from pay TV for California, for Oregon. You're going to have the Big 12 just picked up Colorado, where it wasn't in the footprint before. You will have the SEC now picking up Oklahoma, that was sitting in the Big 12 before. The Big Ten has the widest berth of teams across the country, and they didn't coincidentally pick teams from big markets where they could draw big subscriber fees.
Thank you for that. Thank both. Mr. Bergmayer, you wrote in December of 2023 that with streaming, viewers can pick and choose which services to subscribe to instead of being forced to pay for an all-encompassing bundle. Can you go more into that and how this flexibility has the potential to save consumers money?
Yeah, absolutely. The one-size-fits-all model of MVPDs, cable, and satellite, where any content that you want has to be in that bundle. There's the cross-subsidization that we talk about. Really led to a lot of people paying very inflated prices, in particular for sports. For years, there were calls for a la carte cable and everything. I think streaming has really realized that vision where people can pick and choose. And it means that if you're not a sports fan, this is a very pro-sports day, but lots of Americans aren't sports fans, and there's really no reason why they should be the ones who are forced to subsidize sports fans. And I think that online video gives people the option just to pick just the video that they want. And it's something that we've mentioned before. People aren't really locked into long-term contracts with streaming video too, and they can come and go as content becomes available. And I think that provides a very good discipline for the services to ensure they're continuing to provide value instead of just locking people in.
Good. Mr. Lawlor, real quick, we've heard about Peacock, and we all know, and I want to tell you, I got a lot of comments, a lot of emails, a lot of texts from people who are upset about that. Yep. So please, y'all understand that really did get our attention here in Congress. But can you explain to me how the NFL makes these kind of decisions regarding which markets or streaming services get the air to games?
Yeah, my understanding is, look, the history of the NFL was built on over-the-air broadcast, right? And making games available for free in every market where a team played. And that's what they did as they negotiated this new deal and included Peacock, that they made available those games, Kansas City and Miami, specifically those two teams, where those local markets, NBC affiliates, were allowed to broadcast the games into the market. Where it failed is adjacent markets. Obviously, where it failed is the whole country didn't get to see the game, in the masses, and the ratings were half. The Chiefs game the week before against the Bills reached 50 million households. That game reached half. but even West Palm Beach, an adjacent market, 20 miles from West Palm Beach to Hard Rock Stadium, the NFL had not contemplated. Those are Dolphin fans, and yet they didn't give them the rights into that market,
Right.
only Miami. So I think that's one of the things that's.
Well, let me assure you from constituent feedback, it failed. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Next up, General Florida, Ms. Kamick.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, gentlemen, for being here with us, hanging in to the very bitter end. Don't worry, I'm not going to make any SEC commentary, about how great the Gators are. They are. I go Gators. But I do want to echo my colleague from Georgia's sentiments, particularly about the NFL package. You have no idea how much my mother's heart was broken as a very valuable, loyal customer. She was heartbroken about that whole situation and has never let me hear the end of it. So just putting my 2 cents in as personal privilege right there. But going to jump to you, Mr. Ourand, talking about the younger generation, me being a millennial serving here in this chamber, trying to get a better sense really for how you're meeting that millennial and Gen Z audience. So are younger generations generally consuming sports differently? I personally believe they are, particularly either on our phones or tablets instead of a television. Clearly, there's got to be some data out there highlighting that. And if so, how does this impact the future of the industry and how companies are making decisions in sports media specifically?
Thank you for the question. I do one quick comment to Mr. Balderson. We got to get more Big Ten on this panel here. I don't know what's going on.
Couldn't agree with you more, sir.
Easy.
I think you're right that what the leagues have recognized is that younger people are watching games differently, and what that means is that they're not sitting down for a 3-hour game, and they're happy to follow the highlights of a game on TikTok, even if they're not seeing it in real time. And one of the big areas that the leagues are looking to grow is to try to figure out how to get younger millennials and Gen Z into watching games longer, because that's then where they can sell more advertising, buy it, and make more money out of it.
Do you have any data that reflects a generational divide in, say, on your phone or tablet versus television and the generational divide?
I have none in front of me now.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the emerging sports, and I'll stick with you. What is the impact of new and emerging sports? And I'm not talking about ESPN Ocho and, like the riding tractor lawnmower pole, though it is fascinating. I'm talking more about like Formula One and how they're pushing into the North American market and really, elevating their sport and having a presence in America with street races in Vegas, Miami, of course in Austin, or even pickleball, for example. Pickleball has really taken off in the United States. What kind of impact are those emerging sports having on the sports media contracts?
It's interesting that you picked those two sports, because the nirvana for every sport, big or small, is to get a linear television contract. And F1, Formula One, has a linear television contract. You can see it on traditional TV.
Yeah.
Pickleball has done a couple of deals for linear TV as well. And so I think that the emerging sports, as they look at this market, they're really, they want to go back to the future. They want to get traditional TV because they feel like traditional TV brings in the most viewers, and that's the best way to grow.
So can you discuss the trends then in popularity or viewership of different professional sports leagues and the contract element based on streaming services versus that traditional, say, as you were saying, linear TV?
Well, here's a funny thing, and Mr. Thun said this earlier. You have the streaming services with Amazon, with Google, YouTube, Apple. They all are trillion-dollar companies, and the owners of the broadcast stations are multiple billion-dollar companies, but they have a B in front of it.
Yeah.
And so, what's unique about that is that these big tech companies aren't spending as much as the leagues had hoped for these rights. And one of the reasons is because when you stream something, you're going just to the people that want to see that game. It's almost like a pay-per-view of sorts, as opposed to the traditional television where you're paying for all the subscribers are paying for that one, whether they watch it or not.
Right. Well, and I'm coming short on time, but I'm going to kick it to Mr. Thun, Mr. Lawlor. With so many options to view sports content than ever before, how can industry continue to innovate and offer different options to consumers while ensuring the sustainability of the sports media ecosystem?
Well, thankfully, as I said before, pay TV still is the stopping point for the biggest sports fans. You can't get the same level of sports even if you cobble together all the different streaming services. So pay TV, thankfully, is that bastion of sports rights. But we do have to do more to make sure that our experiences can capture those other streaming products and have the ability to search and discover, subscribe, unsubscribe, toggle through from a pay TV experience to a Netflix or to a Amazon, et cetera. And that's some of the things that we're working on in the investments we're making at DirecTV.
I wish I had more time to answer this question because I have a lot of facts behind it, but I think the bottom line is less exclusivity will provide more opportunity for fans. And so we're an over-the-air broadcast company in Las Vegas. We have all the media rights for the Golden Knights. We put them over the air on broadcast television. They've doubled their ratings, huge visibility, and we are partners with the Golden Knights on a streaming platform that gets more than 1 million minutes of content viewed every week by Golden Knights fans. I think instead of it's one or the other, now they can work together and increase the fandom.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Tomko from New York. Mr. Tomko. Mr. Tomko, could you use your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. My interest in sports media these days relates mostly to its relationship with gambling. Over the last few years, there's been a significant integration of sports betting in media content, bringing gambling directly into the living rooms of millions of Americans and to the phones of many. DirecTV, for example, offers pregame odds embedded right into their sports tab for consumers. That easy access means children, teens, and young adults, college students, are becoming increasingly familiar and engaged with gambling as sports betting continues to provide a lucrative revenue stream and is more deeply incorporated into the fan experience. So I'm concerned that the devastating harms associated with gambling are too often downplayed or left out of discussions on the evolving sports media landscape in relation to this known addictive product. I hope the sports media establishment knows that gambling is an internationally recognized addictive product classified in the same substance use disorder category as heroin, tobacco, and alcohol. 1 in 5 people who struggle with gambling addiction will attempt suicide. Let me repeat that. 1 in 5 people who struggle with gambling addiction will attempt suicide, and that statistic is even higher for our nation's veterans. That means gambling addiction has the highest suicide attempt rate of any of the addictions. That is why I introduced my bill, the Betting on Our Future Act, to ban sports betting advertisements in the same way Congress banned tobacco advertisements back in the 60s. My goal is to raise the alarm about the massive consequences of gambling addiction, and I look forward to discussing with each of you how we might work together to ensure that we are protecting American consumers. Mr. Lawlor, in an interview last April, you discussed how teams and leagues can make up for smaller rights fees they may receive from broadcasters versus streaming platforms by reaching wider audiences and consequently driving increased ticket and merchandise sales, as well as sports betting. So can you discuss if and how you have considered the potential negative impact increased ads and sports betting content might have on those struggling with or are vulnerable to gambling addiction?
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. We've certainly contemplated that inside of our company relative to the rights we've acquired. We believe that there is a place for appropriate integration with gambling, but we don't see it as on our primary over-the-air channel. Next generation television is sort of the next standard of over-the-air broadcast, which would provide the opportunity for second screen content. Think of like the Manning cast on ESPN, where you have your primary over-the-air broadcast and then secondary commentary and so forth. We think that there could be platforms down the road for something like that, which may be sports betting specific, but it's not appealing or pushed to the general population. It would be something that a specific audience would target and therefore not expose a broader audience.
Right. Well, added to that list of individual categories of constituents and consumers that I mentioned are a list of people in recovery, which I find very vulgar, that audience also would be targeted along with these. So Mr. Ourand, Mr. Thun, Mr. Bergmayer, given your different roles, can each of you add to Mr. Lawler's response and discuss whether and how you have considered the potential negative impact of increased ads targeting efforts and sports betting content?
I'll take a first crack at it. Well, as a national satellite platform, given the state laws that govern whether or not gambling is legal in each state, we don't have a broad integration with gambling because of the bespoke nature of the state-by-state laws. We carry a lot of sports services, and I think you see an accelerated pace of shows that are highlighting gambling, giving odds and handicapping, and so that probably is fueling some of the addictions that you're talking about. We're passive to those shows. We don't produce them. We license the channels themselves, and they come downstream to us. We do have advertising, and you see plenty of advertising on the air for those things. But again, a lot of those are straight from the networks.
Well, let me ask this then. Can each of you speak to any actions your companies are taking to make certain our sports media landscape is safe for consumers in the face of increasing access, normalization, advertising, targeting as it relates to sports betting? Because I've seen it around me. People brought it to my attention, especially the youngest of my constituents, and it's a deep concern that I think we need to address. Anyone, any efforts you're making?
I would say advertising is outside of my bailiwick. I do
Okay, but for
content
those-
licensing, but I'm not aware of any broader programs that to accelerate the availability of gambling on our platforms. But I don't have the information related to what our advertising spends would be on that at my fingertips.
Yeah, well, any of these responses to what is now a proliferation of targeting, I would appreciate post this hearing, you filling me with information you're doing to address this. I think we're going to grow a huge concern in our society. And the 800 numbers, I can tell you, I work with Doris Matsui on mental health issues. We do not have enough workforce, clinicians and the like. And we're going to add a load of business here that needs to be addressed. And we should think this through before we become hit consequentially with an addiction rise. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Seeing there are no other members wishing to be recognized, I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list. Without objection, that will be in the order. Without objection, so ordered. I remind members that they have 10 business days to submit questions for the record, and I ask the witnesses to respond to those questions promptly. Members should submit their questions by the close of business on Wednesday, February 14th. There's another thing going on that day, too, so you should remember. Without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Good job.
Thank you.